In a dim parlour by the sea, where the waves sigh like old regrets, Madame Lily Floss lays her tarot cards on green silk and dreams of escape. She longs for a life beyond the shore, beyond her mother's house, beyond her fate. Then, one evening, a stranger arrives, a man who claims they've not yet met, but already remembers everything. Join me, Tony Walker, narrator of the Classic Ghost Stories podcast, while I narrate one of my own stories from a forthcoming book called Supernatural Tales. This is The Parlour of Futures Lost by me, Tony Walker.
Everybody dies, and everybody dies. Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the long road today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back? What's the secret?
The Parlour of Futures Lost by Tony Walker. In a Victorian house in a terrace by the sea in a holiday town, a young woman in a black taffeta dress sits at a wooden table. The tabletop gleams beneath the delicate drape of green silk, and she leans forward to pick up a pack of coloured cards. It's only 4 o'clock, but already the heavy red curtains are drawn. The October afternoon has brought the dark too soon. The gas lamps are lit, and the glass shade of the oil lamp on her table stains her long fingers rose red as she shuffles the deck. She looks at the door, hearing the passers-by outside talking and laughing, and wonders if one more customer might knock, one more reading before the close of the day. The clock on the mantelpiece ticks with the steady precision of a metronome, each metallic sound sharp and deliberate as it echoes from behind its glass face, reminding her it's nearly time to close up and go home. She glances at the door. No one yet. Being alone, her mind has once again wandered to her own particular fate. So she sits, drawing cards, laying them, one after one after one, on the green silk cloth. Outside, the sea growls and sighs, dragging at the beach pebbles, taking them in like the bodies it has claimed, swept beneath the surface to rest in forests of bladderwrack and kelp. The wind moans and the sea breathes, sending gusts that rattle the window frame and tug insistently at the curtain, as though the breeze, full of ghosts, is yearning to speak. Ignoring the wind's fretting whisper, the young woman pauses, thinks, and turns a card. She reveals the Christian knight. The image signifies a hero, her longed-for hero, the knight who will take her to his castle in Lombardy, and there they will eat white grapes and drink red wine, and he will read her poetry by Giacomo Leopardi in his Italian voice, saying words that she will not understand, while he twists his fingers through her curly black hair. She laughs at her thoughts, mocking her fancy. This is no future for her. She is a simple girl from a seaside town, and one does not so easily escape one's fate. Not in England, anyway. The second card she turns is the Gate of Thorns, indicating a stop, an obstruction, a tangled briar in the forest of the sleeping beauty, keeping out lesser men. Disappointment settles over her. But then she thinks that perhaps her knight is not a faithless and ordinary man, and he will cut through thorns with his sharp sword and find her with his keen eyes, and kiss her with his soft lips. She laughs again. What a fool she is. Then she turns the rising moon, a card that tells of futures unseen and hints at paths not yet illuminated. And thus she whiles away the empty hour between her last paid reading and closing time. She reads her fortune, as she often does, and it always reads the same. Here in this dimly lit parlour at the sea's edge, where her table lamp flickers in the draught, and 2 gas lamps hiss and 3 pictures watch her, faces as trapped in their oils as she is in her life. They seem concerned. Perhaps like her, they fear that in the end she will not escape, but she promises them she will take them with her if she does. Every day she comes here, and every day unfolds the same, except on Sundays, when she trades her parlour for a walk down the promenade in a long black dress and a woolen coat. But on this and every other weekday, she sells her intuition for shillings to women who come looking for love and to men who come looking for money. And sometimes, though the men come first asking about money, soon they ask for love. But they are not suitable men, and she does not sell her kisses. She only sells them their own dreams of the future. The room smells of fake roses, her perfume, which she bought from Johnson, White and Cooper on Finkel Street, Workington, and of coal smoke from the small fire that sits nearly dead in the wall on its black iron hearth. She thinks perhaps it is time to rise and turn over the sign that says Madame Lily Floss, clairvoyante and tarot reader. And now we have named her, perhaps she is more real to us. And before she gets up, there comes a knock. She sighs, it's too late. She doesn't want to do another reading, but with rent, food and heat to pay for, she calls out, I'm open. And she is open to any future but this one. A man enters. He wears a grey suit, a bowler hat, brown leather gloves. He removes the gloves and hat and holds them in his hands. He has sea-grey eyes, and she thinks him handsome, though she lowers her own eyes so he cannot see that she thinks him handsome, and she allows herself a slight smile. Perhaps this is her Christian knight who will take her to Lombardy, though she knows he's far more likely a co-op draper's assistant. The door comes open behind him. He didn't shut it firmly enough, and the sea mist follows him as if it wants to listen to his fortune too. With a muttered apology, he has a nice voice. The man turns and closes the door, and Lily watches the mist linger, curling like smoke in the air, soft tendrils of maybe, and she knows that in a reading the mist symbolises dreams, deceit, or the unknown way to death. He says, still clutching hat and gloves, hello, I'd like my fortune told, please. Yes, his voice is nice. Sit, she says. Please sit. You can put your hat and gloves on the table, here, to the left of the cards. Do I pay now? He says, somewhat awkwardly, sitting, putting down his bowler hat and brown leather gloves where she has indicated. She shakes her head. Afterwards, he clears his throat. He seems familiar. Have I read for you before? She says with sharp eyes. No. Then with a shrug she says, I forget people, I can't remember everyone. He's quite adamant. I never had a reading like this before, but suddenly I find I'm curious about the future. She nods and hands him the pack. They all are. Her cards are much worn with use. The pack was her mother's, a gift from her grandmother on her 21st birthday. The old woman painted the cards herself and sealed the pictures with lacquer. He says, are these tarot cards? He taps them. She says, please don't touch the cards unless I say. Sorry. Do you do this every day? He's trying to make small talk. She doesn't want to seem impatient, but it's late. Please shuffle the cards, and when you feel satisfied, the cards do not require you to shuffle them anymore. Place them in front of you. He does so, but instead of watching the cards, he watches her. She thinks, so here's another one come shopping for kisses. Though at least this one's handsome, with his eyes as grey as sea fog, and his hair as black as a licorice. Here, he says, holding the shuffled cards out in front of him. Don't give them to me, she says. Put them down on the green cloth. Now he smiles. Of course, I'll always do what you say, Lily, he says. She frowns. He's over-familiar. He's read her name on the door, but that does not give him permission to use it. She has a stiletto in her long boot, and in the past, she's cut one man's cheek and another's lip when they took her name, and more, without her permission. She turns the first card for this dark-haired stranger. It is the Christian night. Her heart skips. Outside, the sound of the waves rolls on and on. She doesn't dare look at him, but instead places a long index finger on the card and frowns. Yes, he says, but is it bad? Their gaze locks, his sea grey and hers chestnut brown. She cannot meet his stare, and she looks away and says, tapping the card, this is you. Perhaps the next one will be you, he laughs. She too gives a laugh that is partly nerves and partly some other emotion. She looks up. Are you sure I don't know you? She says. You'll know me soon, he says. Soon we'll know each other. Impertinent he is. But she can't help herself laughing. He's so absurd. Forgetting her professionalism, she flirts. You're full of words. Don't tell me. You're a poet. I'm a draper's assistant, he says. Turn the next card. I want to see if it is you. And she takes it with two elegant fingers and a thumb, and the card turns face up. The fortune teller. See, he says, I was right. She shakes her head. No, this is the woman you'll meet. I can't tell when. Soon, maybe this month, maybe longer. Maybe today, he says, maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow, she replies. She turns another card. It is the lovers. He says, well, I think that answers my questions. He smiles at her, and she's now certain she's met him before. She's bewildered. He says, L'amor che muove il sole e l'altre stelle. She puts her hand to her heart, shocked. She feels it run fast. She says, I beg your pardon. He laughs. Sorry, it's Italian. A famous line from Dante. It means the love that moves the sun and other stars. She's astonished. You're Italian. He smiles. Didn't you guess from my looks? No. In fact, only my father's Italian. I was brought up here. My mother's from Whitehaven. She's staring at him now. Quietly she says, is your father from Lombardy? He nods. Yes. She expects him to ask how she knew, to make a weak joke about her being psychic. But he doesn't. He just says, I'll have told you all that soon. You haven't. But later, I will. Later, I'll tell you everything, Lily. Her speech falters. You do know me. I thought so. I recognized you. I'm sorry, I don't remember from where or when. We met tomorrow. She suddenly finds him arrogant. Are you playing jokes on me, sir? If so, I feel it is in bad taste. I'm tired. My nerves are bad. But he continues, and when we meet tomorrow, we'll talk about how I'll take you to Lombardy and feed you grapes and drink wine while I read you poetry. The words come out. Giacomo Leopardi. He laughs. If you like. My father likes him, but if you do, then of course. I've only heard the name, never read him. She looks at this draper's assistant, this Christian knight. Now, there's something insubstantial about him, as if she can see through him. He's like the mist that entered when he did and then vanished. She frowns. But this talk of futures we will share makes no sense at all. He reaches out and touches her hand. She lets him. His touch is so light it feels like a swan's feather, so insubstantial. It's almost not there. Her fingers twine through his, yet his grip is faint, and she cannot feel the bones beneath his flesh. He says, you tell people their futures, but futures aren't certain. They're only maybes dreamed into existence, and unless we dream our future together, we may be lost. But you spoke as if it were already true. He smiles. We'll meet for the first time tomorrow, and we'll talk about a future that might not be. And in this future, I love you and ask you to come with me to Italy. But why would this be lost? He's sad. Because you, my Lily, are tied to this seaside town and its boredom and its familiarities. And despite wanting so much to leave, you will not. And so, in 6 months' time, you'll break my heart because you can't come away with me. And I will drown myself in the deep grey sea. She shakes her head, a sting of tears rising in her eyes. You joke, you make fun of me. She jerks her hand away, and for a moment, it's as if his fingers had never touched her. She looks again. He's fading away in front of her eyes. What is he? A ghost? A spectre? A spirit of futures lost? His chair is now empty, but she sees him still. Lily's heart races, her breath fluttering in her throat like a moth trapped in a glass jar, while the words of the draper's assistant linger in her heart, heavy as the velvet curtains that close out the night. This is madness, she whispers, her words quieter than the hissing gas lamps and the ceaseless pulse of the sea. Her voice shakes. You claim we haven't met, yet here you are, here now, in this room, today. The draper's assistant leans forward. You who deal in fates, in futures gained or missed, when it is given us, let us make our time true and not like that of the 1,000 other lovers who, regretful, close the door and walk away. She shakes her head, her curls shake, dark as a blackbird. I don't understand. Soon. Her hand trembles as she reaches. Another card, she says. The last one. She turns it, her hand shaking. She sees the picture her grandmother painted, the hanged man, inverted and ominous. She gasps. Her eyes blink away the tears. He puts his hand on hers, obscuring the card. She cannot feel his touch at all. Lily, he says, when we meet again, I will not know you. She nods, thinking of the long days before now, the storybooks, the daydreams of being a girl who is not her grandmother's cherished child and her mother's dependable daughter. She takes her fingers to wipe away tears. She has darkened her lashes with soot and elderberry juice, and now it stains her finger ends. She says, but why come now? There is a chance yet. We will be happy, if only you can find the courage. Outside, the sea's rhythm changes. Its waves crash against the shore with renewed vigour. The wind rises. The sound fills the small parlour, drowning out the hiss of gas and the tick of the ornate clock on the mantelpiece. It's time for me to leave, he says. The red lamplight colours his face crimson, but he's hardly there at all. He is vanishing. They both stand. She reaches out and he steps over to her and cups her face in his hand, and as his lips almost meet hers, she smells sea salt. In that dreamed-of kiss, she imagines Lombardy's sun, ripe grapes, red wine, hears Leopardi's verses whispered, feels the warmth of a love that might never be. When she opens her eyes, she is alone. The rhythmic noise of the clock, the heavy threshing sound of the waves on the pebbled beach, the worrying of the wind at the curtain fill the room. On the table, the cards lie scattered, save for one. Somehow it has been turned upright. The fool, it stares up at her. The image shows the jester about to take a carefree step over the cliff, but in the image he is frozen on the precipice. She is frightened of the future. She's frightened of change. Lily touches her lips, still alive from a kiss that never happened. And now she is alone. She allows herself to weep. Fatigue settles over her. She says out loud that she must have nodded off. Her mind painting an apparition from the colours of her desire. And now the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece seems louder, each second measuring today, turning into tomorrow. With a sigh, Lily stands. What a fool I am, she says to no one, a dreamer. I sit here every day and I never act. I never act. She turns and extinguishes the gas lamps. The parlour plunges into a twilight gloom, the gilt-framed paintings watching her with painted eyes. She goes and locks up her fortune-teller's room. She stands outside, her black woolen cloak tight against the sea wind, and turns the key in the lock. She knows her way along the narrow cobblestone streets, the sea air fretting at her heels. She walks along her pavement and locks the shared front door and climbs the stairs to the door of her own room. Once inside, she takes and strikes a match. It flares to life, illuminating the sparse furnishings. Alone, she eats a simple supper. Breadcrumbs fall on her black taffeta dress. and she brushes them away with her fingers. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful, and her dreams say nothing. She tosses and turns, the sheets tangling her legs like seaweed, dragging her deeper down until finally she drowns in the darkness below dream. When morning arrives, she awakes, unrefreshed. The day is foggy and cold. Lily greets it with eyes ringed by shadows, her pale skin almost translucent in the draining grey light. "I will make my bed," she says, but turns instead to go. Lily walks to her parlour through the grey streets, gulls hanging in the wind above her head, while others call raucously from chimneys. The town smells of the sea and last night's stale beer, as it always does. As she opens her fortune-telling parlour, she hasn't forgotten the promised appointment. She pushes the door open. Anticipation hums through her like electricity, even making the hair on her arms stand on end. But he's not there. Throughout the day, her eyes are drawn to the door as if by some magnetic pull. Each footstep on the street outside sends her heart racing. Her clients come and go, and she tells their fortunes with a distracted air, her mind always elsewhere. The hours sit like chains. They come binding her and releasing one after the other, until the afternoon light fades, painting the parlour in ash and shadow. She lights the gas lights, and her hope begins to waver. No, he won't come now. Lily, who has always believed in spirits, always believed in the unseen future and rooms filled with ghosts, now doubts and blames her nerves. She sees nothing but dreams that won't come true. As the last grey of the day disappears, Lily sits at her table, and her fingers, moving of their own volition, go to tell her fortune. She turns over the cards, one by one by one. The same three come again: the Christian night, the rising moon, the gate of thorns. And she knows it's true. Lily is bound here by three things. The first is the fear of a different future. The second, by the bonds of familial love. And the third, by the very earth of the place where she was born. There are no ghosts. No one can see the future. It is now late, the day is finished, and just as she is about to turn off the lamps and retreat to her room, and perhaps go to visit her mother, she hears a man's shoes on the sandstone flag outside. There is a slight sound of knuckles on wood, a faint knock, quite hesitant, as if the visitor has thought better and wants to turn away. But then, more resolute, a firm rap against the door. For a moment, Lily is frozen. Then, gathering her courage, she calls out, "I'm open!"
Everybody dies, don't they? And Sonny died. Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked room today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back? What's the secret?
So this is my own story, so it's really weird. I haven't done one of my own stories, I don't think, since I started doing lots of research. So normally when I do a story, I spend a lot of time looking into the author, and I look on the internet, usually just on the internet, to see what people are saying about it, when it was published, all the bibliographical details. Actually, if I've got a book, most anthologies don't actually say much about the story, but some do, and that's quite useful. Anyway, so this doesn't require a lot of research. It's, why am I doing it? Fair enough. Good question. So I've written quite a few books, and I don't know if you remember my story, is that for some spurious reason Amazon decided to and I published them through KDP. No, I couldn't, since I was 21, I couldn't get a publishing deal, I couldn't get an agent. You might say, well, yeah, obviously, but I kept on trying, and in about 2014-15, Amazon KDP, which allowed self-publishing, which was absolute godsend, and in those days you could sell books. And so I continued selling them for about 10 years, and then some kind of call center executive decided I'd breached copyright for some reason, and the book I'd written, and you couldn't see reason with them, and they just shut me down. And I know people say, "Oh, fight Amazon." Yeah, I'll go to court with Jeff Bezos or whatever his name is, and find out who's got the deeper pockets, pay for the lawyers. But anyway, never mind. So that was very dispiriting for me, and I kept writing, but really I wasn't selling much. The books were available in out-of-the-way places. Anyway, so it put me off writing, and then I had an email this morning from Ingram Spark, who prints and produces my books, and they said, "Oh, we've got this deal with this company, and you can create a website and people can buy books off your website." I'm like, "You what?" So I thought, well, it's worth a try, and maybe I can start to sell some books again. I mean, basically, what the website looked quite nice. What the website, I'll put a link below, but what the website does is it allows me to direct you to Amazon. You can get some of my books through Ingram Spark, because they haven't banned Ingram Spark. So Ingram Spark are technically my publisher, and other ones if you don't like Amazon. But who wouldn't? Anyway, so I thought, oh, maybe there is hope. Maybe there is hope. And a few other things happened this week. My detective channel got hammered with 3 copyright strikes from Agatha Christie Limited, and I've appealed to them, because that's enough to put me out of business, really. And we can talk about copyright, and obviously it's really important for artists, creators who depend on it for a living, it really is. And you don't want people stealing your work if you need the money, basically. And even if somebody like J.K. Rowling or whatever, or Stephen King, or people who are living but have got oodles, it's still their copyright, they're still alive, it's still their money, fair enough. And so I totally get that. I'd looked on my due diligence with the Agatha Christie stories was not sufficient, and I looked on the internet and I saw there's various YouTube channels doing Agatha Christie stories, and I thought, oh, okay, well, she's been dead a while, it must be okay. No. Anyway, so that's kind of knocked me back a bit, and then this came, and this was good news, and then my little Jasper boy, my boy dog, he had his toe, he was born with cancer. He developed cancer very shortly, and he had it on his foot. And when he was a very tiny puppy, he was only about 2-3 months old, he had to have his toe amputated, and I'm very paranoid about it coming back. And he had an ulcer on it this week, and I was really, really worried. So we took him to the vets, and she said, "Oh no, I think it's just scratched or something like that." So fingers crossed. So I was, from being in the depths of doom, I'm really happy now. So a couple of nice things have happened. I'm going to see Hawkwind tonight at Newcastle, so that's really exciting. I like Newcastle anyway, love Hawkwind. So that's all great stuff. And it's sunny, hooray! So the world's turning to the bright side for a bit, and that's lovely. Where was I? So the research. So this story, let's look at the ingredients. I've been reading too much Angela Carter, I think. My eye just caught a book of Angela Carter's there, her short stories lying on the floor. When I wrote this about last October, I have been reading too much Angela Carter. And so there we are, and I ain't Angela Carter, so hopefully it's my own story. I also have had a lot to do with fortune tellers in my time, living with one. But even before I met Sheila, I'll tell you a story about, I went to see a guy in Brighton, years ago, in about 1980 something, and mid 1980s, and Professor Mirza was down on the beach by the pier, and he said some things I thought, goodness me, and it kind of made me think, oh, there's something in this. I've been to a lot since, and there's a reason I do that, because when Sheila puts the events on, I go to help her, and I kind of spend all the money that she's making on going to see flipping fortune tellers. And so actually some of them tell you things that aren't true, and probably the majority tell you things that aren't true, but some seem to have some kind of weird insight. Lily does, of course. And then the other thing is Angela Carter, fortune tellers, and C-scale. So when I was writing, I'll tell you how I came to write Cumbrian Ghost Stories back in 2019. We'd gone for a long weekend to Barbon in just on this. It used to be in Cumbria, it's Westmoreland now. Keep changing the boundaries. Used to be either in Yorkshire or Lancashire. But so anyway, nice place though. And I was drinking. No, I wasn't drinking old Ginger Tom. But we were walking around there, and it's hard to sell books, and I was looking for an angle. And I thought, you can borrow this one if you like. I don't know why people don't do more of it. You know, with the self-publishing, when I hadn't been banned by Amazon, the thing that was becoming evident, and probably more so now, is there's so much content being just churned out. And I'm guessing now that AI can write a book a day, a book an hour, it's going to get absolutely flooded with stuff. But it wasn't at the beginning. But I was looking for a hook, and I thought, well, do you know what? You need to kind of hook it into what people are looking for. So I thought, well, the Lake District where we live, near where we live, gets a lot of tourists, and when they're there, they might want to read a book of ghost stories, Cumbrian ghost stories. Yes. So I thought, a geographical hook, and it worked. And then I did London ghost stories, because I lived in London for quite a while, and that worked. I thought, well, I'm on a roll here, but I've only lived in so many places, really. I could do some Welsh ones. I have done some Welsh ones, because I lived in Wales for quite a long time. And the geographical hooks work, because people who don't know who you are, don't know who Tony Walker is, but they're in this place, they're in New York or London or somewhere, they go in a bookshop and they say, oh, New York ghost stories, oh yeah, I'll buy that because I'm a visitor here, or even I'm a resident here and I'm interested in where I live. And the other one is time. So I did Christmas ghost stories, again, that worked. I did Halloween stories, they don't sell as well, maybe because of crap. I don't think they're crap, but you might. So when you're going to sell something and you've got an angle like that other people are interested in because they don't know who you are, you've got to have something. And there's a detective lady, I can't remember her name now. It proves my point. But she does a load of detective stories set in the Lake District, in the Cotswolds, and all these big British tourist areas. And she does series of them, and people buy them, and it's a brilliant idea. And why don't you do it? I was trying to get a collection of people writing New York ghost stories, because I thought this is going to work. I can't really write them because I've never lived in New York, but somewhere like that, or New Orleans ghost stories, or Prague ghost stories, maybe the Anglosphere, or Dublin ghost stories, you know. And but I can't write those, so I thought, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put together. This is before I was banned. I'll put together an anthology. So I said to people, why don't you? And they go, yeah, I've done a ghost story. It's set in Cleveland, Ohio. I go, that's beautiful. If you live in Cleveland, Ohio, and you can write a set of stories about Cleveland, Ohio, that's fantastic. But it's not one that I would go with because I don't know. I've got no connection. I can't see the big marketing there. Anyway, that's by the by. And I don't think there's much in what I've said you could disagree with. I'm sure somebody will. Somebody always disagrees with everything. But, you know, feel free to use that idea. So that's a long preamble. So I wrote a lot of stories set in Cumbria where I live. And I kind of got into the habit of them, and I wrote more Cumbrian ghost stories. And even when I wasn't writing, I thought, oh, come on, I've written ghost stories set elsewhere. Yorkshire, for example. That's a joke. It's not very far from Cumbria to Yorkshire. And, well, depends where you're at. It's just standing in Barbon, isn't it? So, yeah, Yorkshire, Cumbria, blah, blah, blah. Where was I? Just a second, you could collect yourselves while I collect my thoughts. And, no, they've gone. Those thoughts. They'll never come back now. They've gone. Oh, yes, Seascale. So this one's set in Seascale. Now, if you've ever been to Seascale, it's a small... There was a big craze for... when leisure became available to people, because most of the time it wasn't, but during the Victorian period, the late Victorian period, seaside holidays and bathing and taking the water really exploded, and every part of the British coast ended up with these seaside towns, which are now rather faded Victorian seaside towns. And they're all over the place. I mean, there's famously Blackpool and Morecambe, but down, I remember Herne Bay. The Kent ones used to be a bit dilapidated, but I think they've been gentrified a bit because they're close to London. But certainly sort of Cromer, and Barmouth in Wales. And do you know, I've never been to Tenby. All my years I've never been to Tenby. I've been to some of the Cornish ones. They've become gastro places. St Ives in Newquay. But we've got these series of rather dilapidated, run-down Victorian spa towns. Actually, some of the spa towns, like Llandrindod Wells, is the same thing. Victorian towns built around spas, where you would go and take the water. Have these massive Victorian houses for guests that you can buy for sixpence now. But there's no work there, so you can't afford to live there. Up there, simplify. But there we are. So this is set in Seascam. There we are, I don't know why. Just is. Great beach at Seascam, great ice cream shop. Anyway, that's about it. That's probably all I'm going to say. I rambled for far too long. It's a nice sunny day. I've got to go and have something to eat. I'm going to the gym, and then I'm going to Newcastle, as I said. So I haven't got time to mess around here. But hopefully I'll get this out to you before too long. Hello, my name is Tony Walker and I am the narrator of the Classic Ghost Stories podcast. Join us this week for a comic yet horrific story by Seabury Quinn called The House of Horrors. What twisted science festers here? Summoned to aid a young woman on a stormy night, two doctors instead find themselves seeking refuge in imposing Marston Hall. But what begins as a simple detour soon descends into a grotesque maze of obsession and unholy science. Is any arrival mere chance, or are dark forces at play? Join us as we confront the unnerving secrets residing in the House of Horrors. The House of Horror by Seabury Quinn. Morbleu, friend Trowbridge, have a care, Jules de Grandin warned as my lurching motor car almost ran into the brimming ditch beside the rain-soaked road. I wrenched the steering wheel viciously and swore softly under my breath as I leaned forward, striving vainly to pierce the curtains of rain which shut us in. No use, old fellow, I confessed, turning to my companion. We're lost. That's all there is to it. Ah, he laughed shortly. Do you just begin to discover that fact, my friend? Parbleu, I have known it this last half hour. Throttling my engine down, I crept along the concrete roadway, peering through my streaming windscreen and storm curtains for some familiar landmark. But nothing but blackness, wet and impenetrable, met my eyes. 2 hours before, answering an insistent phone call, de Grandin and I had left the security of my warm office to administer a dose of toxin-antitoxin to an Italian labourer's child who lay choking with diphtheria in a hut at the workmen's settlement where the new branch of the railway was being put through. The cold, driving rain and the Stygian darkness of the night had misled me when I made a detour round the railway cut, and for the past hour and a half I had been feeling my way over unfamiliar roads as futilely as a lost child wandering in the woods. Grâce à Dieu! de Grandin exclaimed, seizing my arm with both his small, strong hands. A light, see, there it shines in the night. Come, let us go to it. Even the meanest hovel is preferable to this so villainous rain. I peeped through a joint in the curtains and saw a faint, intermittent light flickering through the driving rain some 200 yards away. All right, I acquiesced, climbing from the car. We've lost so much time already, we probably couldn't do anything for the Vivianti child, and maybe these people can put us on the right road anyway. Plunging through puddles like miniature lakes soaked by the wind-driven rain, barking our shins again and again on invisible obstacles we made for the light, finally drawing up to a large square house of red brick, fronted by an imposing white-pillared porch. Light streamed out through the fanlight over the white door and from the two tall windows flanking the portal. Parbleu! A house circumstance this, de Grandin commented, mounting the porch and banging lustily at the polished brass knocker. I wrinkled my forehead in thought while he rattled the knocker a second time. Strange I can't remember this place, I muttered. I thought I knew every building within 30 miles, but this is a new one. Ah bah, de Grandin interrupted. Always you must be casting a wet blanket on the parade, friend Trowbridge. First you insist on losing us in the middle of a sacré rainstorm. Then when I, Jules de Grandin, find us a shelter from the weather, you must needs waste time in wondering why it is you do not know the place. Morbleu! You will refuse shelter because you have never been presented to the master of the house if I do not watch you out here. But I ought to know the place, de Grandin, I protested. It's certainly imposing enough to... My defence was cut short by the sharp click of a lock, and the wide white door swung inwards before us. We strode over the threshold, removing our dripping hats as we did so, and turned to address the person who had opened the door. "Why," I began, and stared about me in open-mouthed surprise. "Name of a little blue man," said Jules de Grandin, and added his incredulous stare to mine. As far as we could see, we were alone in the mansion's imposing hall. Straight before us, perhaps for 40 feet, ran a corridor of parquetry flooring covered here and there by rich-hued oriental rugs. White-panelled walls, adorned with oil paintings of imposing-looking individuals, rose for 18 feet or so to a beautifully frescoed ceiling, and a graceful, curving staircase swept upwards from the farther end of the room. Candles in cut-glass sconces lighted the high-ceilinged apartment. The hospitable glow from a log fire burning under the high white marble mantel lent an air of homely coziness to the place. But of anything living, human or animal, there was no faintest trace or sign. Click! Behind us, the heavy outer door swung to silently on well-oiled hinges, and the automatic lock latched firmly. "Death of my life?" de Grandin murmured, reaching for the door's silver-plated knob and giving it a vigorous twist. "Par le moustache du diable, friend Trowbridge, it is locked. Truly, perhaps it had been better if we had remained outside in the rain." "Not at all, I assure you, my dear sir," a rich, mellow voice answered him from the curve of the stairs. "Your arrival was nothing less than providential, gentlemen." Coming towards us, walking heavily with the aid of a stout cane, was an unusually handsome man, attired in pyjamas and dressing gown, a sort of nightcap of flowered silk on his white head, slippers of softest morocco on his feet. "You are a physician, sir?" he asked, glancing inquiringly at the medicine case in my hand. "Yes," I answered, "I am Dr. Samuel Trowbridge from Harrisonville, and this is Dr. Jules de Grandin of Paris, who is my guest." "Ah," replied our host, "I am very, very glad to welcome you to Marston Hall, gentlemen. It so happens that one of my daughter is quite ill, and I have been unable to obtain medical aid for her on account of my infirmities and the lack of a telephone. If I may trespass on your charity to attend my poor child, I shall be delighted to have you as my guests for the night. If you will lay aside your coats." He paused expectantly. "Ah, thank you," as we hung our dripping garments over a chair. "You will come this way, please?" We followed him up the broad stairs and down an upper corridor to a tastefully furnished chamber where a young girl, 15 years of age perhaps, lay propped up with a pile of diminutive pillows. Annabelle, my love, here are 2 doctors to see you," the old gentleman called softly. The girl moved her fair head with a weary, peevish motion and whimpered softly in her sleep, but gave no further recognition of our presence. "And what have been her symptoms, if you please, monsieur?" de Grandin asked as he rolled back the cuffs of his jacket and prepared to make an examination. "Sleep," replied our host. "Just sleep. Some time ago she suffered from influenza. Lately she has been given to fits of protracted slumber, from which I cannot awaken her. I fear she may have contracted sleeping sickness, sir. I'm told it sometimes follows influenza." De Grandin passed his small, pliable hands rapidly over the girl's cheeks in the region of her ears, felt rapidly along her neck over the jugular vein, then raised a puzzled glance to me. "Have you some laudanum and aconite in your bag, friend Trowbridge?" he asked. "There's some morphine," I answered, and aconite, but no laudanum." "No matter." He waved his hand impatiently, bustling over to the medicine case and extracting 2 small phials from it. "No matter, this will do as well. Some water, if you please, monsieur." He turned to the father, a medicine bottle in each hand. "But de Grandin," I began, when a sudden kick from one of his slender, heavily shod feet nearly broke my shin. "De Grandin, do you think that's proper medication?" I finished lamely. "Oh, maybe, undoubtedly," he replied. "Nothing else would do in this case. Water, if you please, monsieur," he repeated, again addressing the father. I stared at him in ill-disguised amazement as he extracted a pellet from each of the bottles and quickly ground them to powder, while the old gentleman filled a tumbler with water from the porcelain pitcher which stood on the chintz-draped washstand in the corner of the chamber. He was as familiar with the arrangement of my medicine case as I was, I knew, and knew that my phials were arranged by numbers instead of being labelled. Deliberately, I saw, he had passed over the morphine and aconite, and had chosen 2 bottles of plain, unmedicated, sugar-of-milk pills. What his objection was, I had no idea, but I watched him measure out 4 teaspoonfuls of water, dissolve the powder in it, and pour the sham medication down the unconscious girl's throat. "Good," he proclaimed, as he washed the glass with meticulous care. "She will rest easy until the morning, monsieur. When daylight comes, we shall decide on further treatment. Will you now permit that we retire?" He bowed politely to the master of the house, who returned his courtesy and led us to a comfortably furnished room farther down the corridor. "See here, de Grandin," I demanded, when our host had wished us a pleasant good night and closed the door upon us. "What was your idea in giving the child an impotent dose like that?" "Shh!" He cut me short with a fierce whisper. "That young girl, mon ami, is no more suffering from encephalitis than you and I. There is no characteristic swelling of the face or neck, no diagnostic hardening of the jugular vein. Her temperature is a bit subnormal, it is true, but upon her breath, I detected the odor of chloral hydrate. For some reason, good, I hope, but bad, I fear. She is drugged." And I thought it best to play the fool and pretend I believed the man's statements. Pardieu, the fool who knows himself no fool has an immense advantage over the fool who believes himself one, my friend. But mean no buts, friend Trowbridge. Remember how the door of this house opened with none to touch it. Recall how it closed behind us in the same way, and observe this, if you will. Stepping softly, he crossed the room, pulled aside the chintz curtains at the window, and tapped lightly on the frame which held the thick plate glass panes. "Regardez-vous," he ordered, tapping the frame a second time. Like every other window I had seen in the house, this one was of the casement type, small panes of heavy glass being sunk into lattice-like frames. Under de Grandin's directions, I tapped the latter and found them not painted wood as I had supposed, but stoutly welded and bolted metal. Also, to my surprise, I found the turnbuckles for opening the casement were only dummies, the metal frames being actually securely bolted to the stone seals. To all intents, we were as firmly incarcerated as though serving a sentence in the state penitentiary. "The door," I began, but he shook his head. Obeying his gesture, I crossed the room and turned the handle lightly. It twisted under the pressure of my fingers, but though we had heard no warning click of lock or bolt, the door itself was as firmly fastened as though nailed shut. Why? I asked stupidly. What's it all mean, de Grandin? Je sais quoi, he answered with a shrug, but one thing I know. I like not this house, friend Trowbridge. Above the hissing of the rain against the windows and the howl of the sea wind about the gables, there suddenly rose a scream, wire-edged with inarticulate terror, freighted with utter transcendental anguish of body and soul. Grand Dieu! He threw up his head like a hound, hearing the call of the pack from far away. Did you hear it too, friend Trowbridge? Of course, I answered, every nerve in my body trembling in horripilation with the echo of the hopeless wail. Pardieu! He repeated. I like this house less than ever now. Come, let us move this dresser before our door. It is safer that we sleep behind the barricades this night, I think. We blocked the door, and I was soon sound asleep. Trowbridge, my friend! The Grandin drove a sharp elbow into my ribs. Wake up, I beseech you! Name of a green goat, you lie like one dead, save it for your so abominable snoring. Eh? I answered sleepily, thrusting myself deeper beneath the voluminous bedclothes. Despite the unusual occurrences of the night, I was tired to the point of exhaustion and fairly drunk with sleep. Up, arise, my friend, he ordered, shaking me excitedly. The coast is clear, I think, and it is high time we did some exploring. Rats, I scoffed, disinclined to leave my comfortable couch. What's the use of wandering about a strange heist to gratify a few unfounded suspicions? The girl might have been given a dose of chloral hydrate, but the chances are that her father thought he was helping her when he gave it. As for these trick devices for opening and locking doors, the old man apparently lives here alone and has installed these mechanical aids to lessen his work. He has to hobble around with a cane, you know. Ah, my companion assented sarcastically. And that scream we heard, did he install that as an aid to his infirmities also? Perhaps the girl woke up with a nightmare, I hazarded, but he made an impatient gesture. Perhaps the moon is composed of green cheese also, he replied. Up and dress, my friend. This house should be investigated while yet there is time. Attend me. But 5 minutes ago, through this very window, I did observe Monsieur, our host, attired in a raincoat, depart from his own front door, and without his cane. Parbleu! He did skip as agilely as any boy, I assure you. Even now, he is almost at the spot where we abandoned your automobile. What he intends doing there, I know not. What I intend doing, I know full well. Do you accompany me or not? Oh, I suppose so, I agreed, crawling from the bed and slipping into my clothes. How are you going to get past that locked door? He flashed me one of his sudden smiles, shooting the points of his little blonde moustache upwards like the horns of an inverted crescent. Observe, he ordered, displaying a short length of thin wire. In the days when woman's hair was still her crowning glory, what mighty deeds a lady could encompass with a hairpin. Pardieu, there was one little grisette in Paris who showed me some tricks in the days before the war. Regard me, if you please. Deftly, he thrust the pliable loop of wire into the keyhole, twisting it tentatively back and forth, at length pulling it out and regarding it carefully. Très bien, he muttered, as he reached into an inside pocket, bringing out a heavier bit of wire. See, he displayed the finer wire. With this I take an impression of that lock's tumblers. Now, quickly he bent the heavier wire to conform to the waved outline of the lighter lip, and voila, I have a key. And he had. The lock gave readily to the pressure of his improvised key, and we stood in the long dark hall staring about us, half curiously, half fearfully. "This way, if you please," the grandeur ordered. "First, we will look in upon la jeunesse to see how it goes with her." We walked on tiptoe down the corridor, entered the chamber where the girl lay, and approached the bed. She was lying with her hands folded upon her breast in the manner of those composed for their final rest, her wide, periwinkle blue eyes staring sightlessly before her, the short, tightly curled ringlets of her blonde bob hair surrounding her drawn, pallid face, like a golden nimbus encircling the ivory features of a saint on some carved icon. My companion approached the bed softly, placing one hand upon the girl's wrist with professional precision. "Temperature low, the pulse weak," he murmured, checking off her symptoms. "Complexion pale to the point of lividity. Now for the eyes. Sleeping, her pupils should have been contracted, while they should now be dilate. Dieu de Dieu. Trowbridge, my friend, come here. Look," he commanded, pointing to the apathetic girl's face. "Those eyes, grand Dieu, those eyes. It is sacrilege, nothing else." I looked into the girl's face and started back with a half-suppressed cry of horror. Asleep as she had been when we first saw her, the child had been pretty to the point of loveliness. Her features were small and regular, clean-cut as those of a face in a cameo. The tendrils of her light yellow hair had lent her a dainty, ethereal charm comparable to that of a Dresden china shepherdess. It had needed but the raising of her delicate, long-lashed eyelids to give her face the animation of some laughing sprite playing truant from fairyland. Her lids were raised now, but the eyes they unveiled were no clear, joyous windows of a tranquil soul. Rather, they were the peepholes of a spirit in torment. The irises were a lovely shade of blue, it's true, but the optics themselves were things of horror. Rolling grotesquely to right and left, they peered futilely in opposite directions, lending to her sweet, pale face the half-ludicrous, wholly hideous expression of a bloating frog. "Good heavens," I exclaimed, turning from the deformed girl with a feeling of disgust akin to nausea. "What a terrible affliction." The grandeur made no reply, but bent over the girl's still form, gazing intently at her malformed eyes. "It is not natural," he announced. "The muscles have been tampered with and tampered with by someone who is a master hand at surgery. Will you get me a syringe and some strychnine, friend Trowbridge? This poor one is still unconscious." I hastened to our bedroom and returned with a hypodermic and stimulant, then stood beside him watching eagerly as he administered a strong injection. The girl's narrow chest fluttered as the powerful drug took effect, and the pale lids dropped for a second over her repulsive eyes. Then, with a sob which was half moan, she attempted to raise herself on her elbow, fell back again, and, with apparent effort, gasped, "The mirror! Let me have the mirror! Oh, tell me it isn't true! Tell me it was a trick of some sort! Oh, the horrible thing I saw in the glass couldn't have been I, was it?" "Tiens, ma petite," the grandeur replied, "but you speak in riddles. What is it you would know?" "Hey, the girl faltered weakly, forcing her trembling lips to frame the words. "That horrible old man showed me a mirror a little while ago and said the face in it was mine. Oh, it was horrible, horrible." "Eh, what is this?" the grandeur demanded on a rising note. "He? Horrible old man? Are you not his daughter? Is he not your father?" "No," the girl gasped, so low her denial was scarcely audible. "I was driving home from Machatsdale last, though I forget when it was, but it was night. My tyres punctured. I think there must have been glass on the road, for the shoes were cut to ribbons. I saw the light in his house and came to ask for help. The old man, who I thought he was so nice and kind, let me in and said he was all alone here and about to eat dinner, and asked me to join him. I ate some or I don't remember what it was.
And the next thing I knew, he was standing by me bed, holding the mirror up to me and telling me it was my face I saw on the glass. Oh, please, please tell me it was some terrible trick he played on me. I'm not truly hideous, am I?
Morbleu, the grandame muttered softly, tugging at the end of his moustache. What is all this? To the girl he said, but of course not. You are like a flower, mademoiselle, a little flower that dances in the wind. You...
And my eyes, they aren't,
she interrupted with piteous eagerness.
Please tell me they aren't.
Mais non, ma chère, he assured her. Your eyes are like the pervenche that mirrors the sky in springtime. They are...
Let me see the mirror, please,
she interrupted in an anxious whisper.
I'd like to see for myself if you, feel all weak inside.
She lapsed back against the pillow, her lids mercifully veiling the hideously distorted eyes, and restoring her face to tranquil beauty. Corps Dieu, the grandame breathed. The chloral reasserted itself none too soon for Judy Grandel's comfort, friend Trowbridge. Sooner would I have gone to the rack than have shown that pitiful child her face in a mirror. But what's it all mean? I asked. She says she came here, and the rest remains for us to find out, I think, he replied evenly. Come, we lose time, and to lose time is to be caught, my friend. The grandame led the way down the hall, peering eagerly into each door we passed in search of the owner's chamber. But before his quest was satisfied, he stopped abruptly at the head of the stairs. Observe, friend Trowbridge, he ordered, pointing a carefully manicured forefinger to a pair of buttons, one white, one black, set in the wall. Unless I am more mistaken than I think I am, we have here the key to the situation, or at least to the front door. He pushed vigorously at the white button, then ran to the curve of the stairs to note the result. Sure enough, the heavy door swung open on its hinge of cast bronze, letting gusts of rain drive into the lower hall. Pardieu, he ejaculated. We have here the open sesame. Let us see if we possess the closing secret as well. Press the black button, Trowbridge, my friend, while I watch. I did his bidding, and a delighted exclamation told me the door had closed. Now what? I asked, joining him on the staircase. He pulled first one end and the other of his diminutive moustache meditatively. The house possesses its attractions, friend Trowbridge, but I believe it would be well if we went out to observe what our friend, the vieillard horrible, does. I like not to have one who shows young girls their disfigured faces in mirrors near our conveyance. Slipping into our raincoats, we opened the door, taking care to place a wad of paper on the sill to prevent its closing tightly enough to latch, and scurried out into the storm. As we left the shelter of the porch, a shaft of indistinct light shone through the rain as my car was swung from the highway and headed towards a depression to the left of the house. Parbleu, he is a thief, this one! The grandame exclaimed excitedly. Hola, monsieur! He ran forward, swinging his arms like a pair of semaphores. What sort of business is it you make with our auto? The wailing of the storm tore the words from his lips and hurled them away, but the little Frenchman was not to be thwarted. Pardieu, he gasped, bending his head against the wind-driven rain. I will stop this scoundrel, if nom du coq, he has done it. Even as he spoke, the old man flung open the car's forward door and leaped, allowing the machine to go crashing down a steep embankment into a lake of slimy swamp mud. For a moment, the vandal stood contemplating his work, then burst into a peal of wild laughter, more malignant than any profanity. Parbleu, robber, apache! You shall laugh from the other side of your mouth, the grandame promised as he made for the old man. But the other seemed oblivious of our presence. Still chuckling at his work, he turned towards the house, stopped short as a sudden heavy gust of wind shook the trees along the roadway, then started forward with a yell of terror as a great branch torn bodily from a towering oak tree came crashing towards the earth. He might as well have attempted to dodge a meteorite. Like an arrow from the bow of divine justice, the great timber hurtled down, pinning his frail body to the ground like a worm beneath the laborer's brogan. "Drawbridge, my friend," the Grandin announced matter-of-factly. "Observe the evil effects of stealing motorcars." We lifted the heavy bough from the prostrate man and turned him over on his back. The Grandin on one side, I on the other. We made a hasty examination, arriving at the same findings simultaneously. His spinal column was snapped like a pipe stem. "You have some last statement to make, monsieur?" the Grandin asked curtly. "If so, you had best be about it. Your time is short." "Yes," the stricken man replied weakly. I meant to kill you, for you might have hit upon my secret. As it is, you may publish it to the world, that all may know what it meant to offend Marston. In my room, we will find the documents. My pets are in the cellar. She was to have been one of them." The pauses between his words became longer and longer. His voice grew weaker with each labored syllable. As he whispered the last sentence painfully, there was a gurgling sound, and a tiny stream of blood welled up at the corner of his mouth. His narrow chest rose and fell once with a convulsive movement. Then his jaw dropped limply. He was dead. The Grandin remarked. "It is a hemorrhage which finished him. A broken rib piercing his lung. I should have guessed it. Come, my friend, let us carry him to the house, then see what it was he meant by that talk of documents and pets. A pest upon the fellow for dying with his riddle half explained. Did he not know that Jules de Grandin cannot resist the challenge of a riddle? Parbleu, we will solve this mystery, Monsieur le Mort, if we have to hold an autopsy to do so." "Oh, for heaven's sake, hush, de Grandin," I besought, shocked at his heartlessness. "The man is dead." "Oh bon," he returned scornfully. "Dead or not, did he not steal your motor car?" We laid our gruesome burden on the hall couch and mounted the stairs to the second floor. With de Grandin in the lead, we found the dead man's room and began a systematic search for the papers he had mentioned almost with his last breath. After some time, my companion unearthed a thick, leather-bound portfolio in the lower drawer of a beautiful old mahogany highboy, and spread its wide leaves open on the white, counterpaned bed. He drew forth several papers and held them to the light. "We begin to make progress, friend Drawbridge. What is this?" He held out a newspaper clipping, cracked from long folding and yellowed with age. It read, "Actress jilts surgeon's crippled son on eve of wedding." Declaring she could not stand the sight of his deformity, and that she had engaged herself to him only in a moment of thoughtless pity, Dora Lee, well-known variety actress, last night repudiated her promise to marry John Beresfield Marston Jr., hopelessly crippled son of Dr. John Beresfield Marston, the well-known surgeon and expert osteologist. Neither the abandoned bridegroom nor his father could be seen by reporters from the Planet last night. "Very good," the Grandin nodded. "We need not go further with that account. A young woman, it would seem, once broke her promise to marry a cripple. And judging from this paper's date, that was in 1896. Here is another. What do you make of it?" The clipping he handed me read as follows. "Surgeon's son, a suicide. Still sitting in the wheelchair from which he has not moved during his walking hours since he was hopelessly crippled while playing polo in England 10 years ago, John Beresfield Marston, son of the famous surgeon of the same name, was found in his bedroom this morning by his valet. A rubber hose was connected with a gas jet, the other end being held in the young man's mouth. Young Marston was jilted by Dora Lee, a well-known vaudeville actress, on the day before the date set for their wedding 1 month ago. He is reported to have been extremely low-spirited since his desertion by his fiancée. Dr. Marston, the bereaved father, when seen by reporters from The Planet this morning, declared the actress was responsible for his son's death and announced his intention of holding her accountable. When asked if legal proceedings were contemplated, he declined further information. So? The Grand Dame nodded shortly. Now this one, if you please. The third clipping was brief to the point of curtness. Well-known surgeon retires. Dr. John Beresfield Marston, widely known throughout this section of the country as an expert in operations concerning the bones, has announced his intention of retiring from practice. His house has been sold and he will move from the city. The record is clear so far, the Grand Dame asserted, studying the first clipping with raised eyebrows. But morbleu, my friend, look at this picture. This Dora Lee. Of whom does she remind you? Huh? I took the clipping again and looked intently at the illustration of the article announcing young Marston's broken engagement. The woman in the picture was young and inclined to be overdressed in the voluminous, fluffy mode of the days before the Spanish-American War. No one whom I know, I began, but halted abruptly as a sudden likeness struck me. Despite the towering pompadour arrangement of her blonde hair and the unbecoming straw sailor hat about the coiffure, the woman in the picture bore a certain resemblance to the disfigured girl we had seen half an hour before. The Frenchman saw recognition dawn in my face and nodded agreement. But of course, he said, now the question is this young girl whose eyes are so out of alignment a relative of this Dora Lee? Or is the resemblance a coincidence? And if so, what lies behind it? Huh? I don't know, I admitted, but there must be some connection. Connection? Of course there is a connection, the Grand Dame affirmed, rummaging deeper in the portfolio. What is this? Nom du nom, friend Trowbridge, I think I smell the daylight. Look. He held a full-page story from one of the sensational New York dailies before him, his eyes glued to the flowing type and crude coarse-screen halftones of half a dozen young women which composed the article. What has become of the missing girls? I read in bold-faced type across the top of the page. Are sinister, unseen hands reaching out from the darkness to seize our girls from palace and hovel, shop, stage, and office? The article asked rhetorically. Where are Ellen Monroe and Dorothy Sawyer and Phyllis Boucher and 3 other lovely light-haired girls who have walked into oblivion during the past year? I read to the end of the sensational account of the girls' disappearances. The cases seemed fairly similar. Each of the vanished young women had failed to return to her home and had never been accounted for in any manner, and in no instance, according to the newspaper, had there been any assignable reason for voluntary departure. Parbleu, but he was stupid even for a journalist, the Grand Dame asserted as I completed my inspection of the story. Why, I wager even my good friend Trowbridge has already noticed one important fact, which this writer has treated as though it were as commonplace as the nose on his face. Sorry to disappoint you, old chap, I answered, but it looks to me as though the reporters covered the case from every possible angle. So, he replied sarcastically, morbleu, we shall have to consult the oculist in your behalf when we return home, my friend. Look, I beseech you, upon the pictures of these so totally absent and unaccounted for young women, cher ami, and tell me if you do not observe a certain likeness among them, not only a resemblance to each other, but to that Mademoiselle Lee who jilted the son of Dr. Marston. Can you see it now? I have pointed it out. No, what? Yes, of course, I responded, running my eye over the pictures accompanying the story. By the Lord Harry de Grandin, you're right. You might almost say there is a family resemblance between these girls. You've put your finger on it, I do believe. Hélas non, he answered with a shrug. I have put my finger on nothing as yet, my friend. I reach, I grope, I feel about me like a blind man tormented by a crowd of naughty little boys, but nothing do the poor fingers of my mind encounter. Pah! Jules de Grandin, you are one great fool. Think, stupid one. He sat on the edge of the bed, cupping his face in his hands and leaning forward till his elbows rested on his knees. Suddenly he sprang erect, one of his elfish smiles passing across his small, regular features. Nom du chat rouge, my friend. I have it, he announced. The pets that old stealer of motor cars spoke of, they are in the basement. Pardieu, we will see those pets, cher Trowbridge. With our 4 collective eyes, we will see them. Did not that so execrable stealer declare she was to have been one of them? Now, in the name of Satan and brimstone, whom could he have meant by she? If not that unfortunate child with eyes like la Grenouille, eh? Why? I began, but he waved me forward. Come, let us go, he urged. I am impatient, I am restless, I am not to be restrained. We shall investigate and see for ourselves what sort of pets are kept by one who shows young girls their deformed faces in mirrors and, parbleu, steals motor cars from my friends. Hurrying down the men's staircase, we hunted about for the cellar entrance, finally located the door, and holding above our heads a pair of candles from the hall, began descending a flight of rickety steps into a pitch-black basement, rock-walled, and, judging by its damp, mouldy odor, unfloored save by the bare, moist earth beneath the house. Parbleu! The dungeons of the Château de Carcassonne are more cheerful than this, the Grandin commented as he paused at the stairs foot, holding his candle aloft to make better inspection of the dismal place. I suppressed a shudder of mingled chill and apprehension as I stared at the blank stone walls, unpierced by windows or other openings of any sort, and made ready to retrace my steps. Nothing here, I announced. You can see that with half an eye. The place is as empty as... Perhaps, friend Trowbridge, he agreed, but Jules de Grandin does not look with half an eye. He uses both eyes, and uses them more than once if his first glance does not prove sufficient. Behold that bit of wood on the earth yonder. What do you make of it? A piece of flooring, maybe? I hazarded. Maybe yes, maybe no, he answered. Let us see. Crossing the cellar, he bent above the planks, then turned to me with a satisfied smile. Flooring does not ordinarily have ringbolts in it, my friend, he remarked, bending to seize the iron ring which was made fast to the boards by a stout staple. Ah! As he heaved upwards, the planks came away from the black earth, disclosing a board-lined well about 3 feet square and of uncertain depth. An almost vertical ladder of 2x4 timbers led downward from the trapdoor to the well's impenetrable blackness. Ah non, we descend, he commented, turning about and setting his foot on the topmost rung of the ladder. Don't be a fool, I advised. You don't know what's down there. True. His head was level with the floor as he answered, but I shall know with luck in a few moments. Do you come? I sighed with vexation as I prepared to follow him. At the ladder's foot he paused, raising his candle and looking about inquiringly. Directly before us was a passageway through the earth, sealed with heavy planks and shored up with timbers like the lateral workings of a primitive mine. Ah, the plot shows complication, he murmured, stepping briskly into the dark tunnel. Do you come, friend Trowbridge? I followed, wondering what manner of thing might be at the end of the black, musty passage, but nothing but fungus-grown timbers and walls of moist black earth met my questioning gaze. The Grand Dame preceded me by some paces, and I suppose we had gone 15 feet through the passage when a gasp of mingled surprise and horror from my companion brought me beside him in 2 long strides. Fastened with nails to the timbers at each side of the tunnel were a number of white glistening objects. Objects which, because of their very familiarity, denied their identity to my wondering eyes. There was no mistaking the things. Even a layman could not have failed to recognize them for what they were. I, as a physician, knew them even better. To the right of the passage hung 14 perfectly articulated skeletons of human legs, complete from foot to ilium, gleaming white and ghostly in the flickering light of the candles. Good heavens, I exclaimed. Sang du diable, Jules, the Grand Dame commented. Behold what is there, my friend. He pointed to the opposite wall. 14 bony arms, complete from hand to shoulder joint, hung pendulously from the tunnel's upright timbers. Pardieu, the Grand Dame muttered. I have known men who collected stuffed birds and dried insects. I have known those who stored away Egyptian mummies, even the skulls of men long dead, but never before have I seen a collection of arms and legs. Parbleu, he was cadro, mad as a hatter, this one, or I am much mistaken. So these were his pets, I answered. Yes, the man was undoubtedly mad to keep such a collection in a place like this. Poor fellow. Nom du canon, the Grand Dame broke in. What was that? From the darkness before us there came a queer, inarticulate sound, such as a man might make attempting to speak with a mouth half filled with food. And as though the noise had wakened an echo slumbering in the cavern, the sound was repeated, multiplied again and again, until it resembled the babbling of half a dozen overgrown infants, or an equal number of full-grown imbeciles. Onward! Responding to the challenge of the unknown like a warrior obeying the trumpet's call to charge, the Grand Dame dashed towards the strange noise, swung about, flashing his candle this side and that, and then, Nom de Dieu, de nom de Dieu, he almost shrieked. Look, friend Trowbridge, look and say that you see what I see, or have I too gone mad? Lined up against the wall was a series of 7 small wooden boxes, each with a door composed of upright slats before it, similar in construction to the coops in which country folk pen brooding hens, and no larger. In each of the hutches huddled an object the like of which I had never before seen, even in the terrors of nightmare. The things had the torsos of human beings, though hideously shrunken from starvation and encrusted with scales of filth. But there all resemblance to mankind ceased. From shoulders and waist there twisted flaccid tentacles of unsupported flesh, the upper ones terminating in flat paddle-like flippers which had some remote resemblance to hands, the lower ones ending in almost shapeless stubs which resembled feet only in that each had a fringe of 5 shriveled, unsupported protuberances of withered flesh. On scrawny necks were balanced caricatures of faces, flat, noseless, chinless countenances with horrible crossed or divergent eyes, mouths widened almost beyond resemblance to buccal orifices, and horror of horrors, elongated, split tongues protruding several inches from the lips and wagging impotently in vain efforts to form words. Satan, thou art undone, the Grand Dame cried, as he held his candle before a scrap of paper decorating one of the cages after the manner of a sign before an animal's den at the zoo. Observe, he ordered, pointing a shaking finger at the notice. I looked, then recoiled, sick with horror. The paper bore the picture and name of Ellen Munro, one of the girls mentioned as missing in the newspaper article we had found in the dead man's bedroom. Beneath the photograph was scribbled in an irregular hand, paid 12th of May, 1897. Sick at heart, we walked down the line of pens. Each was labelled with the picture of a young and pretty girl with the notation paid, followed by a date. Every girl named as missing in the newspapers was represented in the cages. Last of all, in a coop somewhat smaller than the rest, we found a body more terribly mutilated than any. This was marked with the photograph and name of Dora Lee. Beneath her name was the date of her payment, written in bold red figures. Parbleu, what are we to do, my friend? The Grandin asked in a hysterical whisper. We cannot return these poor ones to the world. That would be the worst form of cruelty yet. I shrink from the act of mercy I know they would ask me to perform if they could speak. Let's go up, I begged. We must think this thing over, de Grandin. And if I stay here any longer, I shall faint. Bien, he agreed, and turned to follow me from the cavern of horrors. It is to consider, he began as we reached the upper hall once more, if we give those so pitiful ones a stroke of mercy, we are murderers before the law. Yet what service could we render them by bringing them once more into the world? Our choice is a hard one, my friend. I nodded. Morbleu, but he was clever, that one, the Frenchman continued, half to me, half to himself. What a surgeon. 14 instances of wireless amputation of the hip, and as many more of the shoulder. Every patient lived to suffer the tortures of that hellhole down there. But it is marvelous. None but a madman could have done it. Bethink you, friend Trowbridge. Think how the mighty man of medicine brooded over the suicide of his crippled son, meditating hatred and vengeance for the artless woman who had jilted him. Then, snap, went his great mentality, and from hating one woman he fell to hating all, to plotting vengeance against the many for the sin of the one. And Cordieu, what a vengeance! How he must have laid his plans to secure his victims, how he must have worked to prepare that hell under the earth to house those poor broken bodies which were his handiwork, and how he must have drawn upon the great surgical skill which was his, even in his madness, to transform those once lovely ones into visions of horror we have just beheld. Horror of horrors, to remove the bones and let the girl still live. He rose, pacing impatiently across the hall. What to do? What to do? He demanded, striking his open hands against his forehead. I followed his nervous steps with my eyes, but my brain was too numbed by the hideous things I had just seen to be able to respond to his question. I looked hopelessly past him at the angle of the wall by the great fireplace, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. Slowly but surely the wall was declining from the perpendicular. "The Grandin," I shouted, glad of some new phenomenon to command my thoughts. The wall's leaning. Eh, the wall? He queried. Pardieu, yes. It is the rain. The foundations are undermined. Quick, quick, my friend, to the cellars. All those unfortunate ones are undone. We scrambled down the stairs leading to the basement, but already the earth floor was sopping with water. The well leading to the madman's sub-cellar was more than half full of bubbling, earthy ooze. Mary, have pity, the Grandin exclaimed. Like rats in a trap, they did die. God rest their tired souls. He shrugged his shoulders as he turned to retrace his steps. It is better so. Now, friend Trowbridge, do you hasten aloft to bring down that girl from the room above? We must run for it if we do not wish to be crushed under the falling timbers of this house of abominations. The storm had spent itself, and a red springtime sun was peeping over the horizon as the Grandin and I trudged up my front steps with the mutilated girl stumbling wearily between us. Put her to bed, my excellent one, the Grandin ordered Nora, my housekeeper, who came to meet us, enveloped in righteous indignation in an outsized flannel nightgown. Parbleu, she has had many troubles. In the study, a glass of steaming whiskey and hot water in one hand, a vile-smelling French cigarette in the other, he faced me across the desk. How was it you knew not that house, my friend? He demanded. I grinned sheepishly. I took the wrong turning at the detour, I explained, and got onto the Yerbishire Road. It's just recently been hard surfaced, and I haven't used it for years because it was always impassable. Thinking we were on the Andover Pike all the while, I never connected the place with the old Olmsted mansion I'd seen hundreds of times from the road. Ah, yes, he agreed, nodding thoughtfully. A little turn from the right way and poof, what a distance we have to retrace. Now, about the girl upstairs, I began, but he waved the question aside. The mad one had but begun his devil's work on her, he replied. I, Jules de Grandin, will operate on her eyes and make them as straight as before, nor will I accept 1 penny for my work. Meantime, we must find her kindred and notify them she is safe and in good hands. And now, he handed me his empty tumbler. A little more whiskey, if you please, friend Trowbridge.
Everybody dies, and it's so dark. Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the long road today, didn't you?
How did they come back? What's the secret?
So that was the House of Horror, not the House of Horrors by Seabury Quinn. I think I said the House of Horrors in the intro. It was published in 1926, and I'm going to tell you about Seabury, and I'm going to tell you about the story, what I think about the story. But first I need to explain how I come to choose stories, the scientific method with which I choose the stories. It goes like this. I've got a lot of books, and I browse through them, and actually I feel oppressed by the amount of books I've got, so I'm always trying to get rid of some. So a lot of them, particularly with horror stories or ghost stories or supernatural stories, are anthologies, and so a number of them repeat the same stories. I can't refrain from buying them, but when I get them I think, right, I'm going to do all the stories in this book, then I can give it away. I take them to a second-hand bookshop and they give me some money for them, because I take a lot. So it's about as simple as that. Sometimes I look at a book and I've got 3 massive St. Michael's books from the 1980s, 3 volumes, and I think there are about 60 stories in each, so it's going to take me most of my life to read through those. So that's number one, it's to kind of go through stories. Then the second thing I have is length. Length is a consideration. It can't be too long, or too short either, and most of them tend to be about this length, but some are very long and some are too short, and I can do I've done short ones, and I've bundled a couple of short ones together in some instances, but mainly I avoid the short ones, the very short ones, like flash fiction-ish, and I avoid the long ones unless I'm sitting down to do a novel. And sometimes people suggest stories to me, and it turns out like there's 60,000 words, which is going to take me a long time to do. The books I've got, just browsing through them, the length. Then also I have a kind of a feeling for, because it's a broad church, this classic ghost story stuff, and it includes sort of pulp fiction, and it includes literary fiction, people like Henry James, Edith Wharton, and clever people like that, who are judged to be great writers. And then we have people who basically cobble together stories. It's like the Times literary supplement versus TV Quick, the content, and some of the stuff, particularly in the pulp magazines, as you know, during the 20th century, really, there were a lot of amazing stories and stuff like that. They used to publish these pulp fiction, and a lot of the pulp writers, such as Lovecraft, who at his best rises above pulp, I think. Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, a lot of people like that, and published these pulp stories, and in many cases they don't really have literary merit. What do you mean by that, Tony? Well, a story can be really popular and sell a lot of copies without literary merit. And I tend to avoid the snobbery of stories. I don't really like it, but the truth of it is, somebody like, if you go on Amazon now, you'll see that, Beethoven and Shakespeare have got a lot of one-star reviews. But generally, they probably have got something to have persisted over this time, to have so many fans over the centuries, But I'm not against... But genre fiction at its best can be really fantastic. My eye was caught by Robert Holstock's Mythago Wood, and Dan Simmons' got a book called Hyperion, and I'm seeing Ursula K. Le Guin and things like that. And these are great writers, and alongside them we have, I'm just looking at my bookshelf now, Lawrence Durrell. I like Lawrence Durrell a lot, this sort of modernist experimental fiction, and he was considered a great literary artist. And people like Cormac McCarthy, etc., etc. And I think I have got a kind of channel which I don't put much into, which is about literary short stories. And I'm going to say this, go out on a limb and say, in many cases, when you read one of those short stories, you're moved. You are emotionally moved by them. And that probably is what I mean by literary merit. And I think it's possible to do that with genre fiction. How do you do that? Because the writers who are talented are able to say something about the human condition and make us feel like we're involved in the story. It's not just something we're going to forget straight away. All stories manipulate emotion, and this genre, horror, particularly horror. I think this is actually a horror story. It's not a ghost story. It's a horror story. It manipulates the feelings of disgust, and disgust is a strong one, I think, and pity actually in this story as well, which is a good emotion to have, I think. Empathy for other people to an extent. I don't think it's strong empathy, but there is a bit of empathy there. You may disagree with me, so after all that, I ended up picking this story. So what I'm saying is, I looked at it. It was about the right length. I hadn't done much pulp. I thought, let's do a bit of pulp. And also, it's not in copyright. That's another really important thing, because I don't want to get, I've had my fingers burned a couple of times with this before, and so I thought I'd give it a shot. Now, also, another factor is I have to be mindful of, I'll tell you the two things which I realise, the three things which sell a story. So I might put a story up 1 week and 3,000 people listen to it. And I may put another story up the week after and 60,000 people listen to it, And so what is the difference? And why don't you do the 60,000 all the time, so you get all that ad revenue? Well, for the reasons I've said, sometimes I don't want to be literary, sometimes I don't want to be pulp, and so it isn't just guided by the amount of people that I'll see. And also, I'm also trying to do justice to the genre and try to illuminate different areas of supernatural fiction, or of this wide range of horror stroke supernatural fiction. And I like to, there are many cases. I mean, I was really gutted. There's two people who I have, Ray Bradbury and Robert Aikman, really important writers. I can't read their stories because of copyright issues, which is a real shame, because I think it's part of the mission, if you like, of the channel. It is to kind of introduce people to the wide breadth of work that exists. Anyway, getting back to the point. So, what is the difference between 3,000 and 60,000? There are three things that seem to happen. One is the name of the author. If it's a famous author, or even a famous book. But in this case, most of the books, most of the stories, aren't necessarily famous. Some are, but mostly by now not. So it's the name of the author. If it is an Edith Wharton, that will draw people in. If it is a Robert Aikman, let's say, it would have drawn people in. Ramsey Campbell, I don't do his work for copyright reasons, which is a shame, because he's really good. He's got a lot to say. I think he's really important in this to understand the genre. But so the author, number one. Secondly, the title. If you ever do copywriting courses, there is such a thing as power words. There are certain words which have an emotional valence, which is more. So chocolate probably has some, but peanut really probably doesn't have much, but passion flower, oh yeah, secret, mystery, horror, those are word castle, those are words secret mystery horror are good ones on the Detective Channel, mystery and adventure, but on the ghost, horror is a big one. So here we are, the House of Horror. Also, haunted houses, a big draw. So the final thing, author, title, third thing, is the thumbnail, the picture. If I put a story about a haunted house with a picture of a character in it, say Jules de Grandin, it won't attract the same number of listeners or viewers. It won't. If I put a story that isn't really about a haunted house, but put a haunted house picture on it, like a gloomy haunted house, that will. A great case in point is The Jolly Corner by Henry James, which I did. Okay, Henry James may have drawn some people, but it was the thumbnail picture of the spooky house that worked, I think, for that one. And so it is no secret. You're going to look at the thumbnail. Yeah, I've chosen a haunted house. I think it's legit because it is about a house of horror. So I think it's not too clickbaity. What's the definition of clickbait? Clickbait is getting people to click and not because you're promising them something and you don't come through with the promise. So if I had a story about a dog and a cat and had a picture of a haunted house on it, and you clicked on it, you might very well go, I'm disappointed now. Where's the haunted house? Whereas I think there is a kind of a house of horror in this. So there is a malevolent-looking house in it. So I think it's okay. So those are the things. Let's talk about. Yeah, okay. So why am I even talking about this? I'll tell you why. Because as I'm getting into the story, I do kind of look at it, I try it out in my mouth, and I thought, yeah, I'm ready for a comic story. I've done a few comic stories, The House in Goblin Wood, Honeysuckle Cottage, the Canterville Ghost, the Ghost Ship anyway, I won't just list them. But I've done a few comic stories, and there is definitely a place in this genre for comic stories, a bit like the Terry Pratchett in the fantasy stories. There is a place for comedy. And you know, old Jules de Grandin's his ridiculous, you know, what's the word? Expilations or whatever. That isn't the word. In French. I mean, they're stupid. Le nom de Dieu de le nom de Dieu. You know, what? L'homme de Dieu de le nom de Dieu. What? I said, what? So they're ridiculous. And he was like a manic Hercule Poirot. Instead of Hercule Poirot's neat little black moustache, this guy's got a blonde one. Same crack though. And so I thought, and I thought I can do it with the character, I think he's an American author, but it's sort of Britishy. It's not, because he talks about the state penitentiary, but you know, I think it's okay to do it with a British accent. So I did this posh English bloke versus this manic Frenchman. Both are accents which are inauthentic, neither of them is mine, both of them are caricatures. And then I thought, well, the girl herself, you know, there she is, this pretty damsel in distress with the frog eyes, the grand nuit, I will make her from Liverpool, but this extraordinary, you know, what they say, the Liverpool accent, so you say, you've got to get into it, you have to say things like, Tsjechen Gori, and ga naar hoog, please, you know, so, that's Jimmy Carr. That's how he does it. And the Geordie one, if you're interested, is Pooba Scooba, Umba Lumba. So you just say those things, you get into the accent. Anyway, so I thought, yeah. And so I'm going along with the comedy, and of course the evil bloke. It's very caricatured, isn't it? Very gothic. The car breaks down. They get lost. Oh yeah, on a stormy night. Oh yeah, and they find this neglected mansion that he doesn't recognise. Oh, here we are. It is just it's. Adam's Family stuff, isn't it? And then this bloke comes who's creepily oily, and then the damsel in distress is so gothic so far, and it's all very comic. And I'm going, yeah, this is okay. And then I'm getting towards the end of the story, and I'm realising, actually, this is really disturbing. You know, this is really disturbing what this man is doing, and what you know, the whole imagery, not just the grotesquerie of it, but the whole issue that this man hunts basically innocent random women and does this because of some perceived slight to his son. There's a documentary in the UK at the moment called Adolescence, which has exploded really, and the story, no spoilers, but it's about toxic masculinity, and it's about harm to women and all of that kind of thing. Now, I know, because the world is so polarised, on the one hand, when I've said that, I have women who are very, very angry and full of rage, you know, and on the other hand, I have men who feel that it's gone too far, that men are being blamed for being complete bastards and monsters, and they're not all, you know, it's like some are, yeah, but so you need to sit down, de-rage yourself, because that isn't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how I'm getting into this story, and I'm in this in this milieu. I'm kind of thinking, I'm already being a bit. I've watched this Adolescence. I'm aware of the arguments back and forward. I've read a number of the articles and blog posts people and newspaper articles people have written about it one way or the other, and I'm like, do you know, actually, I am slightly uncomfortable about this. The grotesquerie of it, of him amputating the hips and creating these torso. They wouldn't live really, would they? They wouldn't live. They wouldn't be viable. But and paid, and it's just, if you want to go a bit far into that, that's fairly horrific. It is horrific. It's like, well, it is very. I found it quite disturbing, and I'm aware that I've been playing it for laughs up until this point, and I'm kind of stuck because I've done 4/5 of the story, and I'm thinking, ooh, I'm not comfortable with this story, but I've gone too far, you know. I've sunk my time into it, and I don't think it's an irredeemable story, because there's no way that it's condoned. Our heroes, who don't actually do anything much, do they? I mean, you know, they're the protagonists, but do they protag? They don't really protagging, are they? They don't really do anything. They just turn up. I mean, the guy gets himself killed by stealing the car, and the bizarre thing is that old Jules is more appalled by, you know, he sees the punishment being due. He has a bit of empathy towards the girls at the end, but and then this whole question of, let's euthanize them, because it's the best thing. And like, there's some debates to be had there, I think. I mean, if that's opening a can of worms, which I don't really want to open, you know, but I mean, I think it's, and maybe that's cowardly of me, really. Yeah, anyway, I think it probably is cowardly of me. Again, listening to this woman talking about death in Canada, assisted dying in Canada, and she was very against it, and her arguments, I only heard her side of the story, to be fair, but her arguments were shocking. And remember, I spent most of my last 20 years persuading people not to kill themselves, and her view was that the state was quite happy to kill people now. And I'm like, but this is counter to everything. I would be telling people that their lives were worth living, that there was always hope, that things would get better. And her message was, I have got into it, haven't I? You know, the state is basically saying, you know, it's going to be expensive to treat you, it might not work, you're going to be in a lot of pain, let's just kill you, you know? And that is a gross simplification, but I appreciate that she's partisan. But this idea of euthanizing these sad, tragic women, who of course aren't real, it didn't really happen, but you could argue that things do happen. But yeah, okay, things do happen. But in this story, let's stick to the story. So I was uncomfortable about that. Yeah, it was horrible. And I remember why I like cozy ghost stories as escapist tales, and I'm not massively a horror fan as such. You know, Chainsaw Massacre is not for me. The Human Caterpillar, not for me. Saw, not for me, you know. But, you know, M.R. James, yes. Anyway, okay, let me tell you about Seabury Quinn. I think he's an interesting guy. Seabury Grandin Quinn. Now, did he... I don't know if that he adopted that name or actually he chose Jules de Grandin. because that was his name. Anyway, he was born in 1889. He was also known as Jerome Burke, and he was a lawyer in the US, journalist and author of Pulp Fiction. Although he was initially more popular than H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, his name has largely faded, and he was very prolific. And at the time, he had this occult detective. This is a whole subgenre arising from, and I'm going to say this probably a bit later on, we've got to thank Edgar Allan Poe for this as for many other things. The grotesquerie we find in Poe is related to this in sorts of ways, and I'm going to try and set out how. So of course the simplistic way is Poe writes the first detective stories and he's a French detective, Auguste Dupin, and he does Murders in the Rue Morgue, and I've done that on the Detective Channel. And Poe also writes horror stories, A Telltale Heart, Cask of Amontillado, if I said that right, is, they're horror stories. And so Poe is the father of both in some way, in most ways. He's the father of both the detective, and so therefore the occult detective is a hybrid between the two. And there's been many occult detectives, Kanaki and all sorts of things like that, but a number of them. I'm not a massive fan of occult detectives. I like detectives and I like occult, but I don't like necessarily occult detectives. It just feels too contrived for me. But anyway, Auguste, Jules de Grandin, so something to Poe. Now, let's take a sidestep from Edgar Allan Poe. We're starting with him, and we're talking about Charles Baudelaire. So there's a big French flavour to this. So Charles Baudelaire, the decadent French poet, he translated Poe's stuff into French, and there is this grotesque horror mutilation is a feature of French horror, French literature. I'm not a specialist in French literature at all, but there is the decadent, but also the sensation novels where lots of these things happen. Anyway, so put the French to one side. I don't think it's completely unrelated that the detective here is French. Also, the Germans liked him as well, liked Seabury Quinn, and there were two translations of this story, The House of Horror in German, Das Haus des Schreckens, The House of Screams, and Der Knochenschäler, which seems to be bone peeler. Knoch, I think, my German isn't fantastic enough to say that, but yeah, so the Germans liked it as well. So, this does appeal to Europeans. Let's get back to Seabury. So there we are. He was prolific. He was a pulp writer. He was a lawyer as well and a journalist. And he was born in Washington, D.C. on New Year's Day in 1889. And his family was comfortably off. His father was also called Seabury Quinn. He was a lawyer. And his father followed in his father's footsteps. And in the US, as I understand, professionals like lawyers and doctors are very well rewarded financially. Not as such in the UK. I mean, they don't do badly in the UK, but I think in the US, doctors and lawyers do earn a packet. So he became a lawyer. He had got a law degree in the National University Law School in 1910. He was admitted to the District of Columbia Bar and practiced law, specialising in probate law. This legal expertise, my notes say, gave him a unique perspective on death, inheritance, and the darker aspects of human nature. Well, I think if you're involved in wills, you certainly learn about, I haven't got any personal experience of this, but of how people fall out. My personal experience is working on older adults' wards in hospital and having older adults die and seeing some of the families, how they behaved, which wasn't very endearing or enlightening or nice. Anyway, so he served in the First World War. After his military service, he moved from law to a career that combined his legal knowledge with his growing interest in writing. He became the editor of a group of trade papers in New York, where he also taught medical jurisprudence. So what is that? Jurisprudence is the law about, medical, legal ethics and stuff like that. I was always really interested in that. During this time, he began writing technical articles and increasingly pulp fiction. So his first published works include The Law of the Movies, 1917, in the Motion Picture Magazine, and Demons of the Night, 1918, in Detective Story Magazine. And that was his thing. Pulp magazines were his thing. So in 1925, everybody has a detective, and if you follow the detective fiction, writers tend to create a detective. Think of Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, but also, Jules de Grandal, Auguste Dupin, and all these dudes. And de Grandal was his, and his loyal American assistant, who I made, rather posh Englishman, Dr. Samuel Trowbridge. So they investigate supernatural menaces with a blend of erudition, deductive reasoning, and fervent belief in the power of good. These stories ran for 25, 26 years. They ran until 1951, and they were really popular. And at one time, half the stuff in the pulps was his. He was so prolific. The longest of the stories with Jules Grandet, if you move to go and buy it, is The Devil's Bride, 1932, which was influenced by Robert W. Chambers' A Slave of Souls. And he continued, although he was really successful as a writer, he remained a technical journalist with trade journals. He became a government lawyer in World War II. He made significant contributions to the field of mortuary jurisprudence. Now, if you were a specialist in that field, you probably know his name. He taught this subject at mortuary schools for many years and served as the editor of Casket and Sunnyside, a leading trade journal for the funeral industry. I wasn't aware that they had. I mean, I guess they must have had one, but he contributed to the American Funeral Director, and using the Jerome Burke pseudonym, the Dodge magazine. I think probably, I hope he didn't get his articles mixed up. So, his stories were very popular, but have received some less glowing reviews by modern reviewers. They find the plots rather undistinguished, stereotyped characters and poorly resolved plots. Well, I think the plot resolved in this one, but I mean, the characters are pretty stereotyped. But, he was in with that circle of Robert E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith. He was also a friend of a fellow writer, Mary Elizabeth Councilman, who wrote his obituary. He died in 1969, and after he died, 1977 was published Alien Flesh with Stephen Fabian, which has been described as a sexually explicit, erotic fantasy. He had one child, Seabury Quinn Jr. So, of course, Seabury Quinn was his granddad's name as well, with his first wife. And the son worked in the theatre and had degrees from Harvard and Yale. Yeah, and established, I've got these notes. His son established the Seabury Quinn Jr. Playwrights Festival in Athens, Ohio. So that's him. Well, let's say something about the story. We've kind of touched on it, but so it came out in 1926 in Weird Tales. So one of the Gothic themes that we see is moral corruption and the abuse of science. So stories that pop into my head, of course, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, written just over 100 years before this one. But also Ray Edwards' Sardonicus, not the House of Dr. Sardonicus or the Seven Spirits of Dr. Sardon, that's a Spirit LP. Sardonicus, and this, I think there is a tradition of medicine and horror and horrific doctors doing horrific things. There is something, because we're all probably frightened of going under the knife, and we have to trust our surgeon, and if the surgeon is kind of perverted, that's a bit scary. So revenge and its destructive consequences. His lust for revenge, you may think, Dr. Marston, you may think that his revenge was completely out of proportion. I think I would think that, and he must have been fairly crackers. Anyway, I mean, we've all been jilted, and I know it's really sad, and we've all had our hearts broken, And some of us, do take it so badly, and I've come across this, that people do take their own lives. It's very, very sad. And you can understand. One of the things is that parents, again, this is serious stuff, but there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of hostility, there's great violence around and in suicide, and it ricochets around all the people involved. I used to say, remember, I spent 20 years trying to talk people out of doing it. People would typically come to me and go, nobody cares, or nobody will miss me. They'll say they'll be better off without me. And I would say to them, look, I've worked, with families of people who have that horrible phrase, completed suicide, and I've never met any of the family go, do you know what, we're better off without them. I said, and I used to say this, I said, it's like, you may think there's lots of people who don't care about you, you'd be right, you may have enemies in the world, you may have people who've done you down, who've bullied you, all those sorts of things, and they will hear of your death and they'll go, oh yeah, right, yeah, who knows what emotion, if they're particularly wicked, they may even be pleased, but what it's like is getting everybody who loves you into a room and letting off a hand grenade, because you will blow their lives up. And so his son did that, so I understand. I'm trying to explore the motivation. I'm not sure Seabury Quinn gives much depth to the motivation of the father. I mean, the father, why does he steal the motor car? And what a coincidence it is that the tree falls on him and snaps his spine, and he lives long enough to give a little explanation about what he's done. And then they find the papers. I mean, it's a sort of cobbled together story, really. But, yes. But to do what he did, perhaps. So here we are. I think we're given this beans and chips story. That is to say, it's a very simple meal of baked beans and French fries with a bit of tomato sauce. It's a common meal. It's an easy meal. It's a kind of junk food meal. But we like it. I mean, I love a bit of beans and chips, particularly with a fried egg. And we're given this, and then I'm sitting here thinking, oh yeah, let's talk about the symbolism and the key themes, and it maybe doesn't go any deeper than that. The characters, there is no motivation. We can kind of think, oh yes, well, the father was so disturbed by his son's suicide that, and it may be just that it just is skin deep. It is just there for the sense. You remember the distinction between spectacle and what's its opposite? I don't know. So, spectacle has no depth and no meaning. It's just there for the shock value, for the it doesn't point to anything other than itself. It doesn't lead you anywhere. It just gives you that. And of course, this is the great criticism of Gothic fiction and genre fiction. It doesn't do anything. It's just like, boom, here's the car chase, here's the gun, here's the sexy scene, and it goes and doesn't go any further. Here's the murder, doesn't go any further. That's it. It's only there for that cheap stirring up of emotions without actually exploring anything deeper. I think that's what we've got here. I think the horribleness is merely to be horrible. And so this talks about the sensation novel. So the sensation novel, which was big in France, is purely about shocking events, extreme emotions, and transgressive behaviour. If you read any, and I don't read much of it, if you read any reviews or literary blah blah about stories these days, we're often talking about transgressive. If you read about the Gothic, it's about how transgressive it is. That is to say, it does things that people don't like, It does unusual things that are a bit grotesque and a bit out of the way, and a bit, ooh, why did you do that, you freak? And it's merely to shock, It's like, there was a guy, right, one of our patients, and we used to go and see him at his house, and he was disturbed, so I wouldn't have been seeing him. He was having a massive tattoo done on his back. Don't be shocked about this. This is the real world. This is what people are like. And it was of the Incredible Hulk, so far so good. Ripping his shirt off, so far so good. Incredible Hulk had no trousers on, and the Incredible Hulk was tumescent. And we said to him, you cannot go out with your shirt off when there are children and people around. You can't do it. And there was I was at a concert the other day. There was a guy wandering around with a T-shirt on that had kind of offensive words on it, like "F you" with an F. I can't even say what it is, but it was like, and that is just transgressive. That's just like punching you in the face, metaphorically. So these kind of stories do that because they get. I, as a YouTuber, which I am, and a podcaster, I get all these comments, and most of them are lovely. Some of them aren't, and I realise that some of it is just rage bait. And people go around giving rage bait to people to just, it's a cheap emotion, isn't it? To make you blow up. It's easily done. And a lot of these strong emotions are just easy to do, and I think this is what this story is doing. And this grotesquerie, I keep coming back to that word at the end, it is transgressive. It is, talking about I used to work with this psychiatrist who I had a lot of time for. And sometimes we'd have patients come into the hospital asking an accident emergency, and they would have slashed themselves up. And in a number of cases, they were they'd done it with objects like glass, and they'd not done it, and they'd done it, and they refused sutures, and they would present these wounds to people. And he said to me, they are assaulting you. It is, this transgressive behaviour is an assault. It is their anger. So I said I wasn't going to analyse the story. I wonder about Seabury Quinn. But the other way to look at it is, I've said this before, your darkness has to get out somewhere. And what better, I mean, I write horror stories, so what better, and I like to think I'm a nice fella, what better place is to get this darkness out of you in a kind of a safe way. You get the filthy blackness out of you, but in a way that he's done here. So it is horrible, but it isn't as bad as actually going out and murdering people. Right, I did mention there's a thing called contes cruels. So the conte cruel is a French term, and we've got this French thing going on. It emerges as a distinct literary genre in the late 19th century and is closely associated with French decadence. We talked about Baudelaire and decadence and the death they owe to Edgar Allan Poe. So there's a French author called Auguste Villiers d'Isle-Adam, who truly crystallised the genre with his 1883 collection called Contes Cruels, cruel stories. So they were characterised by sardonic wit, psychological insight, and often shocking and disturbing content. I don't think Seabury Quinn has much psychological insight. His humour is a bit, not slapstick, but it's fairly turned up, sort of loud volume humour, isn't it? Flat-footed humour, we might say. I enjoyed it, but I like that. So, and after Villiers d'Isle-Adam's lead, other French authors began to explore this genre. Octave Mirbeau writes Le Jardin du Supplice, The Torture Garden, 1899, which pushed the boundaries of acceptability with its graphic descriptions of violence and eroticism. The two go close together. People like Saki, who did The Open Door, sometimes has short stories blending wit, cruelty and the supernatural. And the Saki stories aren't actually called the Contes Cruels, but also Roald Dahl has some moral ambiguity and shocking twists. Some of the stuff that happens in his stories is actually cruel, and also interesting point when I'm going through my notes is the Contes Cruels have it's said that M. Night, I can't say his name, Shyamalan, yeah, M. Night Shyamalan. I like his stories, I just can't say his name. And there's some influence there. So we have the Contes Cruels, and then we have another thing which I wanted to talk about, which was there's this French theatre. Well, I find my notes on it, I'm scooting around. So the French are very keen on this. From 1897 to 1962, that late, there was a place called the Théâtre du Grand Guignol, if I've said that right. And it was deliberately unsettling and originates in this late decadent period. often graphic depictions of violence, horror, and the macabre. Melodrama, sensationalism, and explicit gore, very French. But they weren't doing it for cheap thrills. Well, they were, but it was a deliberate attempt. It was very arty to push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable on stage, exploring the darker aspects of the human psyche and confronting audiences with the realities of violence, mental illness, and death, very much like we've been talking about. Plays often featured scenes of torture, mutilation, and psychological breakdown, rendered with a startling degree of realism through the use of special effects, makeup, and skilled acting. So this intense emotion and dramatic tension was delivered through typically short, sharp plays designed to provoke a visceral reaction from the audience. It aimed to shock, disturb, and even terrify, but also sought to engage the audience on an emotional level, forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and the fragility of existence. While often criticised for its sensationalism and exploitation of violence, the Grand Guignol also served as a unique form of social commentary, reflecting anxieties and obsessions of its time and influencing subsequent developments in horror, cinema, and literature. It did. So there we are, unsettling truths. You may have your opinion that we can live without them, to be honest. There's enough unsettling stuff in the world. Let's read stories about summer days and puppy dogs and ice creams instead. Saying which, I've just finished Adam S. Leslie's book, Lost in the Garden. Fantastic book, loved it. I've done a little video about how much I loved it, and I would recommend you go and read it. If you like folk horror, if you like English folk horror, it's a great book. Anyway, this wasn't folk horror, this was just horror, but I like to keep it varied. Join me, Tony Walker, narrator of the Classic Ghost Stories podcast this week as we read W.F. Harvey's The Beast with Five Fingers. We enter the world of Eustace Bolsover, an eccentric gentleman immersed in the study of the natural world and its more unusual phenomena. Set within the quiet gloom of Bolsover Conyers, his ancestral home, the story gradually evolves into a tale of obsession and nightmare. What if part of our very selves could act with a will of its own and meant us harm? Join me as we step into a place where reason begins to unravel, where dust settles thick on forgotten shelves, and where something spider-like begins to crawl across the library bookshelves in the dark depths of the night.
Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody dies. Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked room today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back? What's the secret?
The story, I suppose, begins with Adrian Bolsover, whom I met when I was a little boy and he an old man. My father had called to appeal for a subscription, and before he left, Mr. Bolsover laid his right hand in blessing on my head. I shall never forget the awe in which I gazed up at his face and realized, for the first time, that eyes might be dark and beautiful and shining and yet not able to see. For Adrian Bolsover was blind. He was an extraordinary man who came of an eccentric stock. Bolsover's sons, for some reason, always seemed to marry very ordinary women, which perhaps accounted for the fact that no Bolsover had been a genius and only one Bolsover had been mad. But they were great champions of little causes, generous patrons of odd sciences, founders of querulous sects, trustworthy guides to the bypath meadows of erudition. Adrian was an authority on the fertilization of orchids. He had held at one time the family living at Bolsover Conyers, until a congenital weakness of the lungs obliged him to seek a less rigorous climate in the sunny south coast watering place where I had seen him. Occasionally he would relieve one or other of the local clergy. My father described him as a fine preacher, who gave long and inspiring sermons from what many men would have considered unprofitable texts. An excellent proof, he would add, of the truth of the doctrine of direct verbal inspiration. Adrian Bolsover was exceedingly clever with his hands. His penmanship was exquisite. He illustrated all his scientific papers, made his own woodcuts and carved the reredos that is at present the chief feature of interest in the church at Bolsover Conyers. He had an exceedingly clever knack in cutting silhouettes for young ladies and paper pigs and cows for little children, and made more than one complicated wind instrument of his own devising. When he was 50 years old, Adrian Bolsover lost his sight. In a wonderfully short time, he adapted himself to the new conditions of life. He quickly learned to read Braille. So marvellous indeed was his sense of touch that he was still able to maintain his interest in botany. The mere passing of his long supple fingers over a flower was sufficient means for its identification, though occasionally he would use his lips. I found several letters of his among my father's correspondence. In no case was there anything to show that he was afflicted with blindness, and this in spite of the fact that he exercised undue economy in the spacing of lines. Towards the close of his life, Adrian Bolsover was credited with powers of touch that seemed almost uncanny. It has been said that he could tell at once the colour of a ribbon placed between his fingers. My father could neither confirm nor deny this story. Adrian Bolsover was a bachelor. His elder brother Charles had married late in life, leaving one son, Eustace, who lived in the gloomy Georgian mansion at Bolsover Conyers, where he could work undisturbed in collecting material for his great book on heredity. Like his uncle, he was a remarkable man. The Bolsovers had always been born naturalists, but Eustace possessed in a special degree the power of systemizing his knowledge. He had received his university education in Germany, and then, after postgraduate work in Vienna and Naples, had travelled for 4 years in South America and the East, getting together a huge store of material for a new study into the processes of variation. He lived alone at Bolsover Conyers with Saunders, his secretary, a man who bore a somewhat dubious reputation in the district, but whose powers as a mathematician, combined with his business abilities, were invaluable to Eustace. Uncle and nephew saw little of each other. The visits of Eustace were confined to a week in the summer or autumn, tedious weeks that dragged almost as slowly as the bath chair in which the older man was drawn along the sunny seafront. In their way, the two men were fond of each other, though their intimacy would doubtless have been greater had they shared the same religious views. Adrian held to the old-fashioned evangelical dogmas of his early manhood. His nephew, for many years, had been thinking of embracing Buddhism. Both men possessed, too, the reticence the Bolsovers had always shown, and which their enemies sometimes called hypocrisy. With Adrian, it was a reticence as to the things he had left undone, but with Eustace, it seemed that the curtain which he was so careful to leave undrawn hid something more than a half-empty chamber. 2 years before his death, Adrian Bolsover developed, unknown to himself, the not uncommon power of automatic writing. Eustace made the discovery by accident. Adrian was sitting reading in bed, the forefinger of his left hand tracing the Braille characters, when his nephew noticed that a pencil the old man held in his right hand was moving slowly along the opposite page. He left his seat in the window and sat down beside the bed. The right hand continued to move, and now he could see plainly that they were letters and words which it was forming. Adrian Bolsover wrote the hand, Eustace Bolsover, Charles Bolsover, Francis Bolsover, Sigismund Bolsover, Adrian Bolsover, Eustace Bolsover, Saville Bolsover, B for Bolsover, honesty is the best policy, beautiful Belinda Bolsover. What curious nonsense, said Eustace to himself. King George ascended the throne in 1760, wrote the hand. Crowd, a noun of multitude, a collection of individuals. Adrian Bolsover, Eustace Bolsover. Seems to me, said his uncle, closing the book, that you had much better make the most of the afternoon sunshine and take your walk now. I think I perhaps will, Eustace answered as he picked up the volume. I won't go far, and when I come back I can read to you those articles in Nature about which we were speaking. He went along the promenade, but stopped at the first shelter, and seating himself in the corner best protected from the wind, he examined the book at leisure. Nearly every page was scored with a meaningless jumble of pencil marks, rows of capital letters, short words, long words, complete sentences, copybook tags. The whole thing, in fact, had the appearance of a copybook, and on a more careful scrutiny, Eustace thought that there was ample evidence to show that the handwriting at the beginning of the book, good though it was not nearly so good as the handwriting at the end. He left his uncle at the end of October with a promise to return early in December. It seemed to him quite clear that the old man's power of automatic writing was developing rapidly, and for the first time he looked forward to a visit that would combine duty with interest. But on his return he was at first disappointed. His uncle, he thought, looked older. He was listless too, preferring others to read to him and dictating nearly all his letters. Not until the day before he had left had Eustace an opportunity of observing Adrian Bolsover's newfound faculty. The old man, propped up in bed with pillows, had sunk into a light sleep. His two hands lay on the coverlet, his left hand tightly clasping his right. Eustace took an empty manuscript book and placed a pencil within reach of the fingers of the right hand. They snatched at it eagerly, then dropped the pencil to lose the left hand from its restraining grasp. Perhaps, to prevent interference, I'd better hold that hand, said Eustace to himself as he watched the pencil. Almost immediately it began to write. Blundering Bolsovers, unnecessarily unnatural, extraordinarily eccentric, culpably curious. Who are you? Asked Eustace in a low voice. Never you mind, wrote the hand of Adrian. Is it my uncle who is writing? Oh, my prophetic soul, my uncle. Is it anyone I know? Silly Eustace. You'll see me very soon. When shall I see you? When poor old Adrian's dead. Where shall I see you? Where shall you not? Instead of speaking his next question, Eustace wrote it. What is the time? The fingers dropped the pencil and moved 3 or 4 times across the paper. Then, picking up the pencil, they wrote, 10 minutes before 4. Put your book away, Eustace. Adrian mustn't find us working at this sort of thing. He doesn't know what to make of it. And I won't have poor old Adrian disturbed. Au revoir. Adrian Bolsover awoke with a start. I've been dreaming again, he said. Such queer dreams of leaguered cities and forgotten towns. You were mixed up in this one, Eustace, though I can't remember how. Eustace, I want to warn you. Don't walk in doubtful paths. Choose your friends well. Your poor grandfather... A fit of coughing put an end to what he was saying, but Eustace saw that the hand was still writing. He managed, unnoticed, to draw the book away. I'll light the gas, he said, and ring for tea. On the other side of the bed curtain he saw the last sentences that had been written. It's too late, Adrian, he said. We're friends already, aren't we, Eustace Bolsover? On the following day Eustace left. He thought his uncle looked ill when he said goodbye, and the old man spoke despondently of the failure his life had been. Nonsense, uncle, said his nephew. You have got over your difficulties in a way not 1 in 100,000 would have done. Everyone marvels at your splendid perseverance in teaching your hand to take the place of your lost sight. To me, it's been a revelation of the possibilities of education. Education, said his uncle dreamily, as if the word had started a new train of thought. Education is good, so long as you know to whom and for what purpose you give it. But with the lower orders of men, the base and more sordid spirits, I have grave doubts as to its results. Well, goodbye, Eustace. I may not see you again. You are a true Bolsover, with all the Bolsover faults. Marry, Eustace, marry some good, sensible girl, and if by any chance I don't see you again, my will is at my solicitor's. I've not left you any legacy because I know you're well provided for, but I thought you might like to have my books. Oh, and there's just one other thing. You know, before the end, people often lose control over themselves and make absurd requests. Don't pay any attention to them, Eustace. Goodbye. And he held out his hand. Eustace took it. It remained in his a fraction of a second longer than he had expected, and gripped him with a virility that was surprising. There was, too, in its touch, a subtle sense of intimacy. Why, uncle, he said, I shall see you alive and well for many long years to come. 2 months later, Adrian Bolsover died. Eustace Bolsover was in Naples at the time. He read the obituary notice in the Morning Post on the day announced for the funeral. Poor old fellow, he said. I wonder whether I shall find room for all his books. The question occurred to him again with greater force when 3 days later he found himself standing in the library at Bolsover Conyers, a huge room built for use and not for beauty in the year of Waterloo by a Bolsover who was an ardent admirer of the great Napoleon. It was arranged on the plan of many college libraries, with tall projecting bookcases forming deep recesses of dusty silence, fit graves for the old hates of forgotten controversy, the dead passions of forgotten lives. At the end of the room, behind the bust of some unknown 18th century divine, an ugly iron corkscrew stair led to a shelf-lined gallery. Nearly every shelf was full. I must talk to Saunders about it, said Eustace. I suppose that we shall have to have the billiard room fitted up with bookcases. The two men met for the first time after many weeks in the dining room that evening. Hello, said Eustace, standing before the fire with his hands in his pockets. How goes the world, Saunders? Why these dress togs? He himself was wearing an old shooting jacket. He didn't believe in mourning, as he had told his uncle on his last visit, and although he usually went in for quiet-coloured ties, he wore this evening one of an ugly red in order to shock Morton the butler, and to make them thrash out the whole question of mourning for themselves in the servants' hall. Eustace was a true Bolsover. The world, said Saunders, goes the same as usual, confoundedly slow. The dress togs are accounted for by an invitation from Captain Lockwood to bridge. How are you getting there? There's something the matter with the car, so I've told Jackson to drive me round in a dog cart. Any objection? Oh, dear me, no. We've had all things in common for far too many years for me to raise objections at this hour of the day. You'll find your correspondence in the library, went on Saunders. Most of it I see to. There are a few private letters I haven't opened. There's also a box with a rat or something inside. It came by the evening post. Very likely it's the 6-toed beast Terry was sending us to cross with the 4-toed albino. I didn't look because I didn't want to mess up my things, but I should gather from the way it's jumping about that it's pretty hungry. Oh, well, I'll see to it, said Eustace, while you and the captain earn an honest penny. Dinner over and Saunders gone, Eustace went into the library. Though the fire had been lit, the room was by no means cheerful. We'll have all the lights on at any rate, he said as he turned the switches. And Morton, he added, when the butler brought the coffee, get me a screwdriver or something to undo this box. Whatever the animal is, he's kicking up the deuce of a row. What is it? Why are you dawdling? If you please, sir, when the postman brought it, he told me that they'd bored the holes in the lid at the post office. There were no breathing holes in the lid, sir, and they didn't want the animal to die. That is all, sir. It's culpably careless of the man, whoever he was, said Eustace, as he removed the screws. Packing an animal like this in a wooden box with no means of getting air. Confound it all. I meant to ask Morton to bring me a cage to put it in. Now I suppose I shall have to get one myself. He placed the heavy book on the lid from which the screws had been removed and went into the billiard room. As he came back into the library with an empty cage in his hand, he heard the sound of something falling, and then of something scuttling along the floor. Bother it, the beast's got out! How in the world am I to find it again in this library? To search for it did indeed seem hopeless. He tried to follow the sound of the scuttling in one of the recesses where the animal seemed to be running behind the books in the shelves, but it was impossible to locate it. Eustace resolved to go on quietly reading. Very likely the animal might gain confidence and show itself. Saunders seemed to have dealt in his usual methodical manner with most of the correspondence. There were still the private letters. What was that? 2 sharp clicks, and the lights in the hideous candelabras that hung from the ceiling suddenly went out. "I wonder if something's gone wrong with the fuse," said Eustace, as he went to the switches by the door. Then he stopped. There was a noise at the other end of the room, as if something was crawling up the iron corkscrew stair. "If it's gone into the gallery," he said, "well and good." He hastily turned on the lights, crossed the room and climbed up the stair, but he could see nothing. His grandfather had placed a little gate at the top of the stair so that children could run and romp in the gallery without fear of accident. This Eustace closed, and having considerably narrowed the circle of his search, returned to his desk by the fire. How gloomy the library was. There was no sense of intimacy about the room. The few busts that an 18th century Bolsover had brought back from the Grand Tour might have been in keeping in the old library. Here they seemed out of place. They made the room feel cold, in spite of the heavy red damask curtains and great gilt cornices. With a crash, 2 heavy books fell from the gallery to the floor. Then, as Bolsover looked, another and yet another. "Very well, you'll starve for this, my beauty," he said. "We'll do some experiments on the metabolism of rats deprived of water. Go on, chuck 'em down. I think I've got the upper hand." He turned once more to his correspondence. The letter was from the family solicitor. It spoke of his uncle's death and of the valuable collection of books that had been left to him in the will. "There was one request," he read, "which certainly came as a surprise to me. As you know, Mr. Adrian Bolsover had left instructions that his body was to be buried in as simple a manner as possible at Eastbourne. He expressed a desire that there should be neither wreaths nor flowers of any kind, and hoped that his friends and relatives would not consider it necessary to wear mourning. The day before his death, we received a letter cancelling these instructions. He wished the body to be embalmed. He gave us the address of the man we were to employ, Pennifer, Ludgate Hill, with orders that his right hand should be sent to you, stating that it was at your special request. The other arrangements about the funeral remained unaltered." "Good Lord," said Eustace, "what in the world was the old boy driving at? And what in the name of all holy is that?" Someone was in the gallery. Someone had pulled the cord attached to one of the blinds, and it had rolled up with a snap. Someone must be in the gallery, for a second blind did the same. Someone must be walking round the gallery, for one after the other the blinds sprang up, letting in moonlight. "I haven't got to the bottom of this yet," said Eustace, "but I will do, before the night is very much older." And he hurried up the corkscrew stair. He had just got to the top when the lights went out a second time, and he heard again the scuttling along the floor. Quickly he stole on tiptoe in the dim moonshine in the direction of the noise, feeling as he went for one of the switches. His fingers touched the metal knob at last. He turned on the electric light. About 10 yards in front of him, crawling along the floor, was a man's hand. Eustace stared at it in utter amazement. It was moving quickly in the manner of a geometer caterpillar. The fingers humped up one moment, flattened out the next. The thumb appeared to give a crab-like motion to the whole. While he was looking, too surprised to stir, the hand disappeared round the corner. Eustace ran forward. He no longer saw it, but he could hear it, as it squeezed its way behind the books on one of the shelves. A heavy volume had been displaced. There was a gap in the row of books where it had got in. In his fear lest it should escape him again, he seized the first book that came to his hand and plugged it into the hole. Then, emptying 2 shelves of their contents, he took the wooden boards and propped them up in front to make his barrier double sure. "I wish Saunders was back," he said. "One can't tackle this sort of thing alone." It was after 11, and there seemed little likelihood of Saunders returning before 12. He did not dare to leave the shelf unwatched, even to run downstairs to ring the bell. Morton, the butler, often used to come round about 11 to see that the windows were fastened, but he might not come. Eustace was thoroughly unstrung. At last, he heard steps down below. "Morton!" he shouted. "Morton!" "Sir? Has Mr. Saunders got back yet?" "Not yet, sir." "Well, bring me some brandy and hurry up about it. I'm up in the gallery, you duffer." "Thanks," said Eustace as he entered the class. "Don't go to bed yet, Morton. There are a lot of books that have fallen down by accident. Bring them up and put them back in their shelves." Morton had never seen Bolsover in so talkative a mood as on that night. "Here," said Eustace, when the books had been put back and dusted. You might hold up these boards for me, Morton. That beast in the box got out, and I've been chasing it all over the place. I think I can hear it chawing at the books, sir. They're not valuable, I hope." "Oh, I think that's a carriage, sir. I'll go and call Mr. Saunders." It seemed to Eustace that he was away for 5 minutes, but it could hardly have been more than one when he returned with Saunders. "All right, Morton, you can go now. I'm up here, Saunders." "What's all this row?" asked Saunders as he lounged forward with his hands in his pockets. Luck had been with him all the evening. He was completely satisfied both with himself and with Captain Lockwood's taste in wines. "What's the matter? You look to me to be in an absolutely blue funk." "That old devil of an uncle of mine," began Eustace. "I can't explain it all. It's his hand that's been playing old Harry all the evening, but I've got it cornered behind these books. You've got to help me catch it." "What's up with you, Eustace? What's a game?" "It's no game, you silly idiot. If you don't believe me, take out one of those books and put your hand in and feel it." "All right," said Saunders, "but wait till I've rolled up my sleeve. The accumulated dust of centuries, eh?" He took off coat, knelt down, and thrust his arm along the shelf. "There's something there right enough," he said. "It's got a funny stumpy end to it, whatever it is, and nips like a crab." "Ah, no you don't." He pulled his hand out in a flash. "Shove in a book quickly, now it can't get out." "What was it?" asked Eustace. "Something that wanted very much to get a hold of me. I felt what seemed to be a thumb and a forefinger. Give me some brandy." "How are we to get it out of there?" "What about a landing net?" "No good. It will be too smart for us. I tell you, Saunders, it can cover the ground far faster than I can walk. But I think I see how we can manage it. The 2 books at the ends of the shelf are big ones that go right back against the wall. The others are very thin. I'll take out one at a time, and you slide the rest along until we have squashed it between the end too." It certainly seemed to be the best plan. One by one, as they took out the books, the space behind grew smaller and smaller. There was something in it that was certainly very much alive. Once they caught sight of fingers feeling for a way of escape. At last, they had it pressed between the 2 big books. "There's muscle there, if there isn't warm flesh and blood," said Saunders as he held them together. "It seems to be a hand right enough, too. I suppose this is a sort of infectious hallucination? I've read about such cases before." "Infectious fiddlesticks," said Eustace, his face white with anger. "Bring the thing downstairs. We'll get it back in the box." It was not altogether easy, but they were successful at last. "Drive in the screws," said Eustace. "We won't run any risks. Put the box in this old desk of mine. There's nothing in it that I want. Here's the key. Thank goodness that there's nothing wrong with the lock." "Quite a lively evening," said Saunders. "Now, let's hear more about your uncle." They sat up together until early morning. Saunders had no desire for sleep. Eustace was trying to explain and to forget, to conceal from himself a fear that he had never felt before. The fear of walking alone down the long corridor to his bedroom. "Whatever it was," said Eustace to Saunders on the following morning, "I propose that we drop the subject. There's nothing to keep us here for the next 10 days. We'll motor up to the lakes and get some climbing, and see nobody all day and sit bored to death with each other every night. No, for me, thanks. Why not run up into town? Run's the exact word in this case, isn't it? We're both in such a blessed funk. Pull yourself together, Eustace, and let's have another look at the hand." "As you like," said Eustace. "There's the key." They went into the library and opened the desk. The box was as they had left it on the previous night. "What are you waiting for?" asked Eustace. "I'm waiting for you to volunteer to open the lid. However, since you seem to funk it, allow me. There doesn't seem to be the likelihood of any rumpus this morning at all events." He opened the lid and picked out the ham. "Cold?" asked Eustace. "Tepid, a bit below blood heat by the feel. Soft and supple, too. If it's the embalming, it's a sort of embalming I've never seen before. Is it your uncle's hand?" "Oh, yes, it is all right," said Eustace. "I should know those long, thin fingers anywhere. Put it back in the box, Saunders. Never mind about the screws. I'll lock the desk so that there'll be no chance of its getting out. We'll compromise by motoring up to town for a week. If we can get off soon after lunch, we ought to be at Grantham or Stamford by night." "Right," said Saunders. "And tomorrow, by tomorrow, we shall have forgotten all about this beastly thing." If, when the morrow came, they had not forgotten, it was certainly true that at the end of the week they were able to tell a very vivid ghost story at the little supper Eustace gave on Halloween. "You don't want us to believe it's true, Mr. Bolsover? How perfectly awful." "I'll take my oath on it, and so would Saunders here, wouldn't you, old chap?" "Any number of oaths," said Saunders. "It was a long, thin hand, you know, and it gripped me just like that." "Don't, Mr. Saunders, don't! How perfectly horrid! Now tell us another one, do, only a really creepy one, please." "Here's a pretty mess," said Eustace on the following day, as he threw a letter across the table to Saunders. "It's your affair, though. Mrs. Merritt, if I understand it, gives a month's notice." "Oh, that's quite absurd on Mrs. Merritt's part," replied Saunders. "She doesn't know what she's talking about. Let's see what she says." "Dear Sir," he read, "this is to let you know that I must give you a month's notice as from Tuesday the 13th. For a long time I felt the place too big for me, but when Jane Parfitt and Emma Laidlaw go off with scarcely as much as 'if you please,' after frightening the wits out of the other girls so that they can't turn out a room by themselves, or walk alone down the stairs for fear of treading on half-frozen toads, or hearing it run along the passages at night, all I can say that this is no place for me. So I must ask you, Mr. Bolsover, sir, to find a new housekeeper that has no objection to large and lonely houses, which some people do say, not that I believe them for a minute, my poor mother always having been a Wesleyan, are haunted. Yours faithfully, Elizabeth Merritt. P.S. I should be obliged if you would give my respects to Mr. Saunders. I hope that he won't run any risks with his cold." "Saunders," said Eustace, "you've always had a wonderful way with you in dealing with servants. You mustn't let poor old Merritt go." "Of course she shan't go," said Saunders. "She's probably only angling for a rise in salary. I'll write to her this morning." "No, there's nothing like a personal interview. We've had enough of town. We'll go back tomorrow, and you must work your cold for all it's worth. Don't forget that it's got on to the chest and will require weeks of feeding up and nursing." "All right, I think I can manage, Mrs. Merritt." But Mrs. Merritt was more obstinate than he had thought. She was very sorry to hear of Mr. Saunders' cold and how he lay awake all night in London, coughing. Very sorry indeed. She'd change his room for him gladly and get the south room aired. And wouldn't he have a hot basin of bread and milk last thing at night? But she was afraid that she would have to leave at the end of the month. Try her with an increase of salary, was the advice of Eustace. It was no use. Mrs. Merritt was obdurate, though she knew of a Mrs. Goddard who had been a housekeeper to Lord Gargrave, who might be glad to come at the salary mention. "What's the matter with the servants, Morton?" asked Eustace that evening, when he brought the coffee into the library. "What's all this about Mrs. Merritt wanting to leave?" "If you please, sir, I was going to mention it myself. I have a confession to make, sir. When I found your note asking me to open that desk and take out the box with the rat, I broke the lock, as you told me. I was glad to do it because I could hear the animal in the box making a great noise and I thought it wanted food. So I took out the box, sir, and got a cage and was going to transfer it when the animal got away." "What in the world are you talking about? I never wrote any such note." "Excuse me, sir. It was a note I picked up here on the floor on the day you and Mr. Saunders left. I have it in my pocket now." It certainly seemed to be in Eustace's handwriting. It was written in pencil and began somewhat abruptly. "Get a hammer, Morton," he read, "or some other tool and break open the lock in the old desk in the library. take out the box that is inside. You need not do anything else. The lid is already open. Eustace Bolsover. And you opened the desk? Yes, sir. And as I was getting the cage ready, the animal hopped out. What animal? The animal inside the box, sir. What did it look like? Well, sir, I couldn't tell you, said Morton nervously. My back was turned, and he was halfway down the room when I looked up. What was its colour? Asked Saunders. Black? Oh, no, sir, greyish-white. It crept along in a very funny way, sir. I don't think it had a tail. What did you do then? I tried to catch it, but it was no use, so I set the rat traps and kept the library shut. Then that girl, Emma Laidlaw, left the door open when she was cleaning, and I think it must have escaped. And you think it is the animal that's been frightening the maze? Well, no, sir, not quite. They said it was, you'll excuse me, sir, a hand that they saw. Emma trod on it once at the bottom of the stairs. She thought that it was a half-frozen toad, only white. And then Parfit was washing up the dishes in the scullery. She wasn't thinking about anything in particular. It was close on dusk. She took her hands out of the water and was drying them absent-minded like on the roller towel when she found she was drying someone else's hand as well, only colder than hers. What nonsense, exclaimed Saunders. Exactly, sir, that's what I told her, but we couldn't get her to stop. You don't believe all this? Said Eustace, turning suddenly towards the butler. Me, sir? Oh, no, sir. I've not seen anything. Nor heard anything. Well, sir, if you must know, the bells do ring at odd times, and there's nobody there when we go, and when we go round to draw the blinds at night, as often as not somebody's been there before us. But as I says to Mrs. Merritt, a young monkey might do wonderful things, and we all know that Mr. Bolsover has had some strange animals about the place. Very well, Morton, that will do. Do you make of it? Asked Saunders when they were alone. I mean, with the letter he said you wrote. Oh, that's simple enough, said Eustace. See the paper it's written on. I stopped using that paper years ago, but there were a few odd sheets and envelopes left in the old desk. We never fastened up the lid of the box before locking it in. The hand got out, found a pencil, wrote this note, and shoved it through the crack onto the floor. When Morton found it, that's plain as daylight. But the hand couldn't write, couldn't it? You've not seen it do the things I've seen. And he told Saunders more of what had happened at Eastbourne. Well, said Saunders, in that case we have at least an explanation of the legacy. It was the hand which wrote, unknown to your uncle, that letter to your solicitor bequeathing itself to you. Your uncle had no more to do with that request than I. In fact, it would seem that he had some idea of this automatic writing and feared it. Then, if it's not my uncle, what is it? I suppose some people might say that a disembodied spirit had got your uncle to educate and prepare a little body for it. Now it's got into that little body and is off on its own. Well, what are we to do? We'll keep our eyes open, said Saunders, and try to catch it. If we can't do that, we shall have to wait till the Bally clockwork runs down. After all, if it's flesh and blood, it can't live forever. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then Saunders saw it sliding down the banister in the hall. He was taken unawares and lost a full second before he started in pursuit, only to find that the thing had escaped him. 3 days later, Eustace, writing alone in the library at night, saw it sitting on an open book at the other end of the room. The fingers crept over the page as if it were reading, but before he had time to get up from his seat, it had taken the alarm and was pulling itself up the curtains. Eustace watched it grimly as it hung onto the cornice with 3 fingers and flicked thumb and forefinger at him in an expression of scornful derision. I know what I'll do, he said. If I only get it into the open, I'll set the dogs onto it. He spoke to Saunders of the suggestion. It's a jolly good idea, he said, only we won't wait till we find it out of doors. We'll get the dogs. There are the 2 terriers and the underkeeper's Irish mongrel that's onto rats like a flash. Your spaniel's not got spirit enough for this sort of game. They brought the dogs into the house, and the keeper's Irish mongrel chewed up the slippers, and the terriers tripped up Morton as he waited at table. But all 3 were welcome. Even false security is better than no security at all. For a fortnight, nothing happened. Then the hand was caught, not by the dogs, but by Mrs. Merritt's grey parrot. The bird was in the habit of periodically removing the pins that kept its seed and water tins in place and of escaping through the holes in the side of the cage. When once at liberty, Peter would show no inclination to return and would often be about the house for days. Now, after 6 consecutive weeks of captivity, Peter had again discovered a new way of unloosing his bolts and was at large, exploring the tapestried forests of the curtains and singing songs in praise of liberty from cornice and picture rail. "It's no use your trying to catch him," said Eustace to Mrs. Merritt as she came into the study one afternoon towards dusk with a step-ladder. "You'd much better leave Peter alone. Starve him into surrender, Mrs. Merritt, and don't leave bananas and seed about him to peck at when he fancies he's hungry. You're far too soft-hearted." "Well, sir, I see he's right out of reach now on that picture rail. So, if you wouldn't mind closing the door, sir, when you leave the room, I'll bring his cage in tonight and put some meat inside it. He's that fond of meat, though it does make him pull out his feathers to suck the quills. They do say that if you cook—" "Never mind, Mrs. Merritt," said Eustace, who was busy writing. "That'll do. I'll keep an eye on the bird." For a short time, there was silence in the room. "Scratch poor Peter," said the bird. "Scratch poor Peter. Be quiet, you beastly bird. Poor old Peter. Scratch poor Peter, do. I'm more likely to wring your neck if I get hold of you." He looked up at the picture rail, and there was the hand, holding onto a hook with 3 fingers, and slowly scratching the head of the parrot with the 4th. Eustace ran to the bell and pressed it hard, then crossed to the window, which he closed with a bang. Frightened by the noise, the parrot shook its wings preparatory to flight, and as it did so, the fingers of the hand got hold of it by the throat. There was a shrill scream from Peter as he fluttered across the room, wheeling round in circles at ever descended, borne down under the weight that clung to him. The bird dropped at last quite suddenly, and Eustace saw fingers and feathers rolled into an inextricable mass on the floor. The struggle abruptly ceased as finger and thumb squeezed the neck. The bird's eyes rolled up to show the whites, and there was a faint, half-choked gurgle. But before the fingers had time to loose their hold, Eustace had them in his own. "Send Mr. Saunders here at once," he said to the maid who came in answer to the bell. "Tell him I want him immediately." Then he went with the hand to the fire. There was a ragged gash across the back where the bird's beak had torn, but no blood oozed from the wound. He noted with disgust that the nails had grown long and discoloured. "I'll burn the beastly thing," he said, but he could not burn it. He tried to throw it into the flames, but his own hands, as if impelled by some old primitive feeling, would not let him. And so Saunders found him, pale and irresolute, with the hand still clasped tightly in his fingers. "I've got it at last," he said in the tone of triumph. "Good, let's have a look at it. Not when it's loose. Get me some nails and a hammer and a ball of some sort. Can you hold it all right?" Yes, the thing's quite limp. Tired out with throttling, poor old Peter, I should say." "And now," said Saunders when he returned with the things, "what are we going to do?" "Drive a nail through it first so it can't get away. Then we can take our time over examining it." "Do it yourself," said Saunders. "I don't mind helping you with guinea pigs occasionally, when there's something to be learned, partly because I don't fear a guinea pig's revenge. This thing's different." "Oh, my aunt," he giggled hysterically. "Look at it now." For the hand was writhing in agonized contortions, squirming and wriggling upon the nail like a worm upon the hook. "Well," said Saunders, "you've done it now. I leave you to examine it." "Don't go! In heaven's name! Cover it up, man! Cover it up! Shove a cloth over it!" And he pulled off the antimacassar from the back of the chair and wrapped the board in it. "Now get the keys from my pocket and open the safe. Chuck the other things out. Oh, Lord, it's getting itself into frightful knots. Open it quick!" He threw the thing in and banged the door. "We'll keep it there till it dies," he said. "May I burn in hell if I ever open the door of that safe again." Mrs. Merritt departed at the end of the month. Her successor, Mrs. Handyside, certainly was more successful in the management of the servants. Early in her rule, she declared that she would stand no nonsense, and gossip soon withered and died. "I shouldn't be surprised if Eustace married one of these days," said Saunders. "Well, I'm in no hurry for such an event. I know him far too well for the future Mr. Bolsover to like me. It would be the same old story again. A long friendship slowly made, marriage, and a long friendship quickly forgotten." But Eustace did not follow the advice of his uncle in marrying. Old habits crept over and covered his new experience. He was, if anything, less morose. and showed a great inclination to take his natural part in country society. Then came the burglary. The men, it was said, broke into the house by way of the conservatory. It was really little more than an attempt, for they only succeeded in carrying away a few pieces of plate from the pantry. The safe in the study was certainly found open and empty, but as Mr. Bolsover informed the police inspector, he had kept nothing of value in it during the last 6 months. "Then you're lucky in getting off so easily, sir," the man replied. "By the way they have gone about their business, I should say they were experienced cracksmen. They must have caught the alarm when they were just beginning their evening's work." "Yes," said Eustace, I suppose I am lucky." "I've no doubt," said the inspector, "that we shall be able to trace the men. I've said that they must have been old hands at the game. The way they got in and opened the safe shows that, but there's one little thing that puzzles me. One of them was careless enough not to wear gloves, and I'm bothered if I know what he was trying to do. I've traced his finger marks on the new varnish on the window sashes in every one of the downstairs rooms. They're very distinctive ones, too." "Right hand or left or both?" asked Eustace. "Oh, right every time. That's a funny thing. He must have been a foolhardy fellow, and I rather think it was him that wrote that." He took out a slip of paper from his pocket. "That's what he wrote, sir. 'I've got out, Eustace Bolsover, but I'll be back before long.' Some jailbird must have escaped, I suppose. It'll make it all the easier for us to trace him. Do you know the writing, sir?" "No," said Eustace. "It's not the writing of anyone I know." "I'm not going to stay here any longer," said Eustace to Saunders at luncheon. "I've got on far better during the last 6 months than I expected, but I'm not going to run the risk of seeing that thing again. I shall go up to town this afternoon, get Morton to put my things together and join me with the car at Brighton on the day after tomorrow, and bring the proofs of those 2 papers with you. We'll run over them together. How long are you going to be away?" "I can't say for certain, but be prepared to stay for some time. We've stuck to work pretty closely through the summer, and I, for one, need a holiday. I'll engage the rooms at Brighton. You'll find it best to break the journey at Hitchin. I'll wire to you there at the Crown to tell you the Brighton address." The house he chose at Brighton was in a terrace. He'd been there before. It was kept by his old college gyp, a man of discreet silence, who was admirably partnered by an excellent cook. The rooms were on the first floor. The 2 bedrooms were at the back and opened out of each other. "Mr. Saunders can have the smaller one, though it is the only one with a fireplace," he said. "I'll stick to the larger of the 2, since it's got a bathroom adjoining. I wonder what time he'll arrive with the car." Saunders came about 7, cross and cold and dirty. "We'll light the fire in the dining room," said Eustace, "and get Prince to unpack some of the things while we're at dinner. What were the roads like?" "Rotten, swimming with mud and a beastly cold wind against us all the day. And this is July. Dear old England." "Yes," said Eustace. "I think we might do worse than leave old England for a couple of months." They turned in soon after 12. "You oughtn't to feel cold, Saunders," said Eustace, "when you can afford to sport a great fur-lined coat like this. You do yourself very well, all things considered. Look at those gloves, for instance. Who could possibly feel cold when wearing them? They're far too clumsy, though, for driving. Try them on and see." And he tossed them through the door into Eustace's bed and went on with his unpacking. A minute later, he heard a shrill cry of terror. "Oh, Lord!" he heard. "It's in the glove! Quick, Saunders, quick!" Then came a smacking thud. Eustace had thrown it from him. "I've chucked it into the bathroom," he gasped. "It's hit the wall and fallen into the bath. Come now if you want to help." Saunders, with a lighted candle in his hand, looked over the edge of the bath. There it was, old and maimed, dumb and blind, with a ragged hole in the middle, crawling, staggering, trying to creep up the slippery sides, only to fall back, helpless. "Stay there," said Saunders. "I'll empty a collar box or something, and we'll jam it in. It can't get out while I'm away." "Yes, it can," shouted Eustace. "It's getting out now. It's climbing up the plug chain." "No, you brute, you filthy brute, you don't!" "Come back, Saunders. It's getting away from me. I can't hold it. It's all slippery. Curse its claws. Shut the window, you idiot. It's got out." There was the sound of something dropping onto the hard flagstones below, and Eustace fell back, fainting. For a fortnight he was ill. I don't know what to make of it, the doctor said to Saunders. I can only suppose that Mr. Bolsover has suffered some great emotional shock. You had better let me send someone to help you nurse him, and by all means indulge that whim of his never to be left alone in the dark. I would keep a light burning all night if I were you, but he must have more fresh air. It's perfectly absurd, this hatred of open windows. Eustace would have no one with him but Saunders. I don't want the other man, he said. They'd smuggle it in somehow, I know they would. Don't worry about it, old chap. This sort of thing can't go on indefinitely. You know I saw it this time as well as you. It wasn't half so active. It won't go on living much longer, especially after that fall. I heard it hit the flags myself. As soon as you're a bit stronger, we'll leave this place, not bag and baggage, but with only the clothes on our backs, so it won't be able to hide anywhere. We'll escape it that way. We won't give any address, and we won't have any parcels sent after us. Cheer up, Eustace. You'll be well enough to leave in a day or two. The doctor says I can take you out in a chair tomorrow. What have I done? Asked Eustace. Why does it come after me? I'm no worse than other men. I'm no worse than you, Saunders. You know I'm not. It was you who was at the bottom of that dirty business in San Diego, and that was 15 years ago. It's not that, of course, said Saunders. We're in the 20th century, and even the parsons have dropped the idea of your old sins finding you out. Before you caught the hand in the library, it was filled with pure malevolence to you and all mankind. After you spiked it through with that nail, it naturally forgot about other people and concentrated its attention on you. You were shut up in that safe, for nearly 6 months. That gives you plenty of time for thinking of revenge. Eustace Bolsover would not leave his room, but he thought there must be something in Saunders' suggestion of a sudden departure from Brighton. He began rapidly to regain his strength. We'll go on the 1st of September, he said. The evening of the 31st of August was oppressively warm. Though at midday the windows had been wide open, they had been shut an hour or so before dusk. Mrs. Prince had long since ceased to wonder at the strange habits of the gentlemen on the first floor. Soon after their arrival, she had been told to take down the heavy curtains in the 2 bedrooms, and day by day the rooms had seemed to grow more bare. Nothing was left lying about. Mr. Bolsover doesn't like to have any place where dirt can collect, Saunders had said as an excuse. He likes to see into all the corners of the room. Couldn't I open the window just a little? He said to Eustace that evening. We're simply roasting in here, No, leave well alone. We're not a couple of boarding school misses fresh down from a course in hygiene lectures. Get the chessboard out. They sat down and played. At 10 o'clock, Mrs. Prince came to the door with a note. I'm sorry I didn't bring it before, she said, but it was left in the letterbox. Open it, Saunders, and see if it wants answering. It was very brief. There was neither address nor signature. Will 11 o'clock tonight be suitable for our last appointment? Who's it from? Asked Bolsover. It was meant for me, said Saunders. There's no answer, Mrs. Prince. And he put the paper into his pocket. A dunning letter from a tailor, I suppose. He must have got wind of our leaving. It was a clever lie, and Eustace asked no more questions. They went on with their game. On the landing outside, Saunders could hear the grandfather's clock whispering the seconds, blurting out the quarter hours. Check, said Eustace. The clock struck 11. At the same time, there was a gentle knocking on the door. It seemed to come from the bottom panel. Who's there? Asked Eustace. There was no answer. Mrs. Prince, is that you? She's up above, said Saunders. I can hear her walking about the room. Then lock the door, bolt it to. Your move, Saunders. While Saunders sat with his eyes on the chessboard, Eustace walked over to the window and examined the fastenings. He did the same in Saunders' room, the bathroom. There were no doors between the 3 rooms, or he would have shut and locked them too. Now, Saunders, he said, don't stay all night over your move. I've had time to smoke 1 cigarette already. It's bad to keep an invalid waiting. There's only one possible thing for you to do now. What was that? The ivy blowing against the window. There, it's your move now, Eustace. It wasn't the ivy, you idiot. It was someone tapping at the window. And he pulled up the blind. On the outer side of the window, clinging to the sash, was the hand. What's that it's holding? It's a pocket knife. It's going to try to open the window by pushing back the fastener with the blade. Well, let it try, said Eustace. Those fasteners screw down. They can't be opened that way. Anyhow, we'll close the shutters. It's your move, Saunders. I've played. But Saunders found it impossible to fix his attention on the game. He could not understand Eustace, who seemed all at once to have lost his fear. What do you say to some wine? He asked. You seem to be taking things coolly, but I don't mind confessing that I'm in a blessed funk. You've no need to be. There's nothing supernatural about that hand. Saunders, I mean, it seems to be governed by the laws of time and space. It's not the sort of thing that vanishes into thin air or slides through oaken doors. And since that's so, I defy it to get in here. We'll leave the place in the morning. I, for one, have bottomed the depths of fear. Fill your glass, man. The windows are all shuttered. The door is locked and bolted. Pledge me my Uncle Adrian. Drink, man. What are you waiting for? Saunders was standing with his glass half raised. It can get in, he said hoarsely. It can get in. We've forgotten. There's a fireplace in my bedroom. It'll come down the chimney. Quick, said Eustace as he rushed into the other room. We haven't a minute to lose. What can we do? Light the fire, Saunders. Give me a match, quick. They must all be in the other room. I'll get them. Hurry, man, for goodness sake. Look, in the bookcase. Look in the bathroom. Here, come and stand here. I'll look. Be quick, shouted Saunders. I can hear something. Then plug a sheet from your bed up the chimney. No, here's a match. He had found one at last that had slipped into the crack in the floor. Is the fire laid? Good, but it may not burn. I know. The oil from that old reading lamp and this cotton wool. Now, the match, quick. Pull the sheet away, you fool. We don't want it now. There was a great roar from the grate as the flame shot out. Saunders had been a fraction of a second too late with the sheet. The oil had fallen onto it. It, too, was burning. The whole place will be on fire, cried Eustace as he tried to beat out the flames with a blanket. It's no good. I can't manage it. You must open the door, Saunders, and get help. Saunders ran to the door and fumbled with the bolts. The key was stiff in the lock. Hurry, shouted Eustace, or the heat will be too much for me. The key turned in the lock at last. For half a second Saunders stopped to look back. Afterwards, he could never be quite sure as to what he had seen. But at the time he thought that something black and charred was creeping slowly, very slowly, from the mass of flames towards Eustace Bolsover. For a moment he thought of returning to his friend, but the noise and the smell of the burning sent him running down the passage, crying, "Fire! Fire!" He rushed to the telephone to summon help and then back into the bathroom. He should have thought of that before. For water. As he burst into the bedroom, there came a scream of terror, which ended suddenly, and then the sound of a heavy fall. This is the story which I heard on successive Saturday evenings from the senior mathematical master at a second-rate suburban school. For Saunders has had to earn a living in a way which other men might reckon less congenial than his old manner of life. I had mentioned by chance the name of Adrian Bolsover, and wondered at the time why he changed the conversation with such unusual abruptness. A week later, Saunders began to tell me something of his own history, sordid enough, though shielded with a reserve I could well understand, for it had to cover not only his failings, but those of a dead friend. Of the final tragedy he was at first especially loath to speak, and it was only gradually that I was able to piece together the narrative of the preceding pages. Saunders was reluctant to draw any conclusion. At one time he thought that the fingered beast had been animated by the spirit of Sigismund Bolsover, a sinister 18th century ancestor who, according to legend, built and worshipped in the ugly pagan temple that overlooked the lake. At another time, Saunders believed the spirit to belong to a man whom Eustace had once employed as a laboratory assistant, a black-haired, spiteful little brute, he said, who died cursing his doctor because the fellow couldn't help him live to settle some paltry score with Bolsover. From the point of view of direct contemporary evidence, Saunders' story is practically uncorroborated. All the letters mentioned in the narrative were destroyed, with the exception of the last note which Eustace received, or rather which he would have received had not Saunders intercepted it. That I had seen myself. The handwriting was thin and shaky, the handwriting of an old man. I remembered the Greek he was used in appointing. A little thing that amused me at the time was that Saunders seemed to keep the note pressed between the pages of his Bible. I had seen Adrian Bolsover once. Saunders I learned to know well. It was by chance, however, and not by design, that I met a third person in the story, Morton, the butler. Saunders and I were walking in the zoological gardens on Sunday afternoon when he called my attention to an old man who was standing before the door of the reptile house. "Why, Morton," he said, clapping him on the back, "how is the world treating you?" "Poorly, Mr. Saunders," said the old fellow, though his face lighted up at the greeting. "The winters drag terribly nowadays. There don't seem to be no summers or springs. You haven't found what you were looking for, I suppose?" "No, sir, not yet, but I shall some day. I always told them that Mr. Bolsover kept some queer animals." "And what is he looking for?" I asked, when we had parted from him. "A beast with 5 fingers," said Saunders. "This afternoon, since he has been in the reptile house, I suppose it will be a reptile with a hand. Next week it will be a monkey with practically no body. The poor old chap is a born materialist."
Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody dies. Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked drawer today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back? What's the secret?
So that was The Beast with 5 Fingers by W.F. Harvey. You may know it better as the, I think, 1946 film with Peter Lorre. Yeah, The Beast with 5 Fingers. The story is different. It's about a pianist, isn't it? In the black and white movie. But that's how I first came across the story. I'll tell you a bit about W.F. Harvey. So William Fryer Harvey, we've done at least one of his stories before, August Heat, which you'll find on the podcast, the short story, that one. And sort of not horrific, but a bit unsettling. This was at times grotesque, and one of my... let me tell you about Harvey first. So he was born in 1885 in Leeds in West Yorkshire, and he was born into a rich Quaker family. If you know what Quakers are, they're a kind of Protestant sect that's known for quite unorthodox and radical, for the time, views, where they sit in silence until they're moved to speak by the Holy Spirit. Traditionally pacifists. Traditionally, they do a lot of. They've got a big social conscience, and a lot of the factories, usually very successful in business. I mean, obviously not every Quaker, and they have a reputation and a history of treating their workers really nicely and giving them fantastic conditions to work in. So the Quakers, a bit more to it than that, but that's what do you know about Quakers, Tony? There's a Quaker meeting house in most towns, and I think a lot of the Quakers went across to the US with the other Protestant sects, although they are slightly different. I think they're more mystical in a sense, whereby if we differentiate between mystical and religious views, religious, is about the external trappings, the liturgy, the building, the words, the book, the form of the service, the actual beliefs that you will have, whereas mystics tend to look for confirmation from God from the inside, if you like, and Quakers tend to fall into that. I've got both dogs. I've got 2 of my 3 dogs up here at the moment, and it's weather's slightly warming, so the flies around, and they go nuts chasing flies. So if you hear the sound of something being knocked over or snapping jaws, it's because they've seen a fly. I'm not going to ban them. They can stay in here. So anyway, going back to W.F. Harvey was a Quaker family and rich, really. He had an inheritance on his father's side, and his parents therefore were allowed to, because of the money, devote themselves to charitable causes in accordance with their faith, as we've pointed out. I think it was his uncle, Thomas Edmund Harvey, was Member of Parliament. He went to Leeds and he trained in medicine, and he went to the University of Leeds and later pursued medical training at Balliol College, Oxford, where a lot of politicians go to Balliol College. During the First World War, he served as a sergeant lieutenant in the Royal Navy. His distinguished service included a heroic act of life-saving, rescuing an engineer from a flooded engine room, an act for which he was awarded the Albert Medal for life-saving, one of the highest civilian honours for bravery. However, this caused him severe lung damage, and the effects of this injury compromised his health and his career. And he couldn't really continue as a doctor, so he became a writer. And he published several collections of short stories, including Midnight House and Other Tales 1910 and The Beast with Five Fingers in 1928. This was originally published, I'll tell you about the publication of this story and we'll get to it, but in between those collections. The Beast with Five Fingers, as we said, was made into a 1946 film. It's very interesting because of his lifelong faith as a Quaker, and you know, they were pacifists, so very often Quakers would serve in the medical, if they were drafted, called up, they would serve in the medical areas of the armed forces, like he did, of course. So yeah, Quaker emphasis on pacifism, inner peace and social justice, and you would think that, well, what's this guy with those outward tenets doing writing horror stories? Well, I've said it before and I've said it again. All of us are complete creatures. We contain both light and dark. We can either acknowledge our greyness, which is a combination of both the good bits of us and the bad bits of us. I'm not saying he was like this, but you know, very often the dark has to come out somewhere. You know, the bad in us has to come out somewhere, or the things that are macabre and dark. You know, I just think that's true. And they came out in his stories, and that allowed him to be a nice person in the rest of his life. So, yeah, you may say, you know, that may be something that occurred to you. This story, you know, his medical training, he knows about anatomy, doesn't he? It's not gone into great detail with anatomical terms in the story, but he clearly knows about, and he's seen plenty of severed hands, I would imagine, in his time, unlike most of us. So perhaps, you know, when he was describing a severed hand, he'd seen a few, maybe none on the Peter Lorre film playing the piano, or in this one climbing up the curtains and strangling poor old Peter the parrot. Maybe people will contact me, parrot lovers. I'm a lover of parrots. I didn't write the story, I just read it. So and Peter didn't really exist, so don't get too upset about Peter's demise. Or the demise of the hand, although I suspect most people don't give a monkey's about whether the hand gets burned. It's Peter we're worried about. Maybe we're worried about Peter more than Eustace Bolsover. So anyway, he spent his later years in Letchworth in Hertfordshire, and he continued to write despite recurring illness, and he died in 1937 at the relatively young age of 52, and he's buried at the churchyard of St Mary the Virgin in Old Letchworth. He wasn't massively prolific, but he led I think his stories are interesting. I think there's a lot to say about this story. So this story, the publication history, The Beast with Five Fingers, it was first published in 1919 in an anthology called The New Decameron, Volume the First. And then he later republished it in his own collection, The Beast with Five Fingers and Other Stories, which came out in 1928. What was the New Decameron? That's interesting in itself. It was a multi-volume anthology series published in the years following the First World War, beginning in 1919. Obviously, he's in the first of it. So the Decameron, the original Decameron, is an Italian collection of stories dating from the 14th century, written by Giovanni Boccaccio. And it tells the stories of, it's 100 tales by a group of people, young people sheltering from the Black Death. So they left the cities, and my dad had a copy of the Decameron. I never read it. I can see the cover, but I looked at it, but I never got around to reading it. Hang on a second, there's something going on in Dog World behind me. What's going on? What are you doing? You're under the bed? What are you doing under the bed? Oh, who knows? I have no idea what they're doing under the bed. Callie, what were you doing under the bed? Anyway, never mind, let's get back to this. So this idea of the New Decameron was to offer a varied and engaging series of modern tales, essays and reflections bringing together contemporary writers from the early 20th century, and he had the great honour of being in the first volume. Eventually there were 6 volumes published between 1919 and 1929, and the interesting thing is that each book dealt with a single day of a tour, as we would say, of the various men and women on the tour tell their stories as a way to pass the time. So the editor was Wilfrid Blair, who was probably Wallace Wilfrid Blair Fish. He was a journalist, part-time author and playwright. There's a framing story, okay? So the Cameron had a framing story that sets it up, and Blair Fish may have written that. It was published by the Medici Society. So let's say about this story. So this has a framing story as well. I wasn't completely sure. There's the old Mr. Bolsover, and we told this story of the Bolsovers being eccentric gentleman scientists, as Darwin was, and you may disagree that he was I think he was a gentleman, to be honest, in the strict terms of his time, and although he went to sea and collected those things as part of scientific, he was a scientist, and I suppose he was a professional scientist. I think I'm tangling myself up here a bit, but you know what I mean. So the tradition of enthusiastic and knowledgeable amateur scientists expanding the knowledge of humanity it would have been very familiar to readers. And so we have this story of this unknown narrator who tells us how he came across this tale, and he first of all meets Uncle Adrian. I had an Uncle Adrian, who is blind, which seems significant, but I'm not sure why. So Uncle Adrian is eminent, he goes blind, and he learns to tell things like the colour of a ribbon just by the touch. So his sense of touch becomes extremely extended, and perhaps this is why so much energy is given to the hand and the fingers that they take on a life of their own. I don't really understand that. And then, of course, perhaps he could have written a story where it was Eustace's own hand, but I suppose he'd then have to explain how it became severed. Although it could have been an accident, maybe that would have been a different story. But the choices that Harvey made are the ones he made, and so I'm not struggling, but I'm wondering why Uncle Adrian appears at all. I don't think Uncle Adrian is necessary. I think you could have got round the story with fly hunting. There's 3 of them here now. Without Uncle Adrian, and the fact that it seems significant that he's blind, and I think it is the only sense I can make of it is that it somehow concentrates extreme sensitivity in the hand to the extent that it splits off. Very interesting. I don't know if you come across alien hand syndrome. There's a lot of writing on it now, but I came across it first in Oliver Sacks' books, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, which talks about neurological accidents and the effect of brain injury to produce some quite startling descriptions of how people were, and really challenging to our understanding of what we are. For example, with alien hand syndrome, and of course a good example of this is Peter Sellers' Dr. Strangelove, where his hand does all sorts of things he doesn't want to do. So Oliver Sacks talks about people who, and who else did I read about this? Perhaps Ian McGilchrist, talking about how these hands have personalities of their own in the left hand and the right hand. And often somebody who's got alien hand syndrome will look at the hand that they don't feel is theirs anymore, that's operating independently, and they will say it's not theirs, and what's that doing there, or it's their mother's, or they come up with these. I don't know if you never worked with, you used to get this a lot with alcoholics. People would confabulate. So if you ask people who've got mental, usually organic brain problems, they report a bizarre occurrence or something that doesn't seem to make sense, they will confabulate, they'll make a story up which seems perfectly plausible to them, and they appear to actually believe it, even though looking at it, it's just beyond belief. It's, somebody else is looking at it thinking, no, that can't be true, but they do this, and people with alien hand syndrome will confabulate all sorts of stories about that this isn't their hand, it's somebody else's hand, it might be your hand. I've never actually met a patient like this, I must say, but it's a documented neurological condition. in this case, of course, the hand goes a bit further. It's actually severed and self-animating, and seems to be able to live without food or drink. So it's a very interesting hand. What is the symbolism of the hand? Well, of course, it immediately reminded me of a story by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, which The Ghost of a Hand, which I've done. That hand is a ghost hand. This is not a ghost hand. It's very corporeal. It's very real, and it has its own intelligence, like alien hand syndrome. If you don't know about alien hand syndrome, it's really interesting. You should go and read up on it. And if you look at, I'm trying to think of what is the symbolism. We look at severed hands. Trawling the internet, you find the legend of St Cuthbert, a 7th century saint of Northumbria, not very far from me. There's churches to Cuthbert all over the place around here. His hand, he was miraculously healed by touching the severed hand of St Oswald, a previous Northumbrian saint and king and martyr, killed by Cadwallon of Gwynedd. And so it's a symbol of divine power and healing in that case. There's an Irish myth, there's an interesting Irish character called, probably a god of some kind, Nuada Aragad Law. So, Nuada of the silver hand. Now, he loses his hand in battle. And because for the old Irish kings you had to be physically whole, or you had to be unblemished, or you couldn't be a king, they, Dian Cecht, who's the physician, magician, makes him a functioning silver hand. So Aragad law is hand, and Aragad is the Irish word for silver. Now, he then, it's the loss of power by losing his hand and the attempt to reclaim power through artificial means. This guy, Nuada, is probably related to the god known from Roman sources in Britain, maybe Gaul as well, as Nodens. Nodens. And he has there's a place in Gloucestershire called Lydney, which was one of his temples. And he seemed to be particularly associated with greyhounds, but also he was a god of healing. And people would go to his temple, we know that from archaeology. He morphs into later medieval Welsh stories as Meath of Llaw Eraint, who's also known as Llydd Llaw Eraint because of the alliteration of the same thing. Llaw is Welsh for hand, Lur or Lur in Cornish, and Law in Gaelic. Hope you're with me there. And Aragad in Welsh is Arian, usually, older Eraint, Archant in Breton, Archant in Cornish. Anyway, so silver. So this silver hand, anyway, I've spent a lot of time on something that's got nothing at all to do with the story. And of course we have the Hand of Glory, which is a folklore object, and it's supposed to be the severed and pickled hand of a hanged man, can be mummified, and you burn candles on it. And when it was lit, the candles on it, I think you actually lit the fingers, it makes everybody sleep. So thieves prized it so they could get into a house and make everybody sleep. That's a hand of glory. So if you were hanged, somebody would come and cut your hand off and then sell it, whether they believed it worked or not, or whether they just saw, we'll sell it to some gullible thief. And then, of course, other things like, there's other stories. The Monkey's Paw by W.W. Jacobs. We have a supernatural monkey's paw. I'm not sure that's completely equivalent. Telltale Heart, of course, is the separated heart of Edgar Allan Poe. I should say that, and I forgot to say, that W.F. Harvey was a big fan of Poe, and so this probably is what got him into writing grotesque stories. So that's the symbolism of the hand. Other things struck me about the story. The first thing is this. I'm going to use, you've already heard my dogs chasing flies, so, obviously this is not a professional podcast. I'm going to tell you something. When I was about 17, I was in a band, 16, 17. I was a drummer, and we thought we were going to make it big, but we never did. And one of the lads there, the bass player, introduced me to cannabis. I only did it then. I've taken CBD oil since, but obviously strictly illegal, don't tell anybody. And I didn't smoke. The story of why I don't smoke is my grandfather died of lung cancer. When he was dying, he shook my hand and he said, "Promise me, Tony, you'll never smoke." And I never did. That was a long time ago. But so I didn't smoke it, so what I would do would eat it. And I ate some, nothing happened, so I ate a big chunk, and so I was away with the fairies. I thought I was in a spaceship at one point, so I got him to walk me halfway up the hill. I went home and I sat down sweating and feeling the strangest, and guess what was on the TV? The Beast with Five Fingers. So here I am sitting with my mother and father watching The Beast with Five Fingers, the Peter Lorre version, and freaking out with it. And then many years later I saw, I'm terrified, I thought it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. And then many years later I watched it again. I thought, this is comedy. This is a comedy. And I think one of the problems writing horror is you stretch people's credulity. Obviously you're telling stories about things that can't really happen. Well, most of us think they can't really happen. The danger is if you make it too far-fetched, people will just abandon it and go, no, and it becomes comic, So I think, I'm not sure if Harvey was intending some of Eustace and Saunders' banter to be comic. I mean, they see this thing and they actually behave in a very pragmatic, practical way. We're going to pin it down. And tell you what, in the bookshelf, you jam it and we'll grab it, put your hand in there. What have you got? Oh, it's a dismembered hand wandering around. And they're not, you would probably freak out, wouldn't you? You'd probably leave the house and never go back again. It would upturn your idea of what can be. It would unseat your reason. I mean, at least Lovecraft makes you go crazy when you see things like this. But these guys are just taking it in their stride. Okay, they are a bit worried about it, but at the end he's not worried about it. He just has a drink. I can't get in. It's fine. It's a dismembered, not dismembered, a severed hand trying to get in your window. It's fine. Don't play chess. So I wondered whether it was intended to be comic. And of course, there are stories that mix the comic and the horrific. I always think of Twin Peaks in that. And I think some of my Ashridge stories, I've tried to do that as well. To go between lines that will make you laugh to very shortly afterwards making you frightened. And so I'm not sure if Harvey was doing that there in this story, but I wondered whether he was, because it was so obviously, he couldn't really be taking this seriously. Anyway, other things to talk about from the story are, what did Eustace do to be punished? So he's a natural scientist, natural philosopher, he's going around the world, he's trying to work out things on heredity. And he's punished. This hand fixes on him. I think Saunders says at one point, the hand probably hated everybody, then you put a big nail through its middle and it really, really hated you. And actually that's a very pragmatic and practical response, isn't it? If you nail something down, it's probably not going to like you very much. And so it could be something as simple as that. But looking at morally, what has Eustace done? I'm not sure that Harvey had this belief, but is it hubris? You remember the great crime of the ancient Greeks was hubris. If you Icarus, think of Icarus, if you overreach as a human and you step on the toes of the gods and enter the realms that are reserved for the gods, then expect punishment. Pride comes before a fall and stuff like that. This theme of and there are so many stories and movies about humanity thinking itself too big for its boots and actually being punished either by aliens or I don't know where I got that from. War of the Worlds isn't quite like that, but or supernatural powers that happens a lot in horror films, or natural disaster. And I think a lot of this climate stuff, whether scientifically it's true or not, and most scientists believe it is true, but whether but we're also playing a story that we've told ourselves many times, which is this millennial apocalyptic story. This is a story that humans tell themselves, this is the end of the world. This is the end of the world. No, this is the end of the world. And it's almost like we play into this. This is a theme, and we kind of dress it up with whatever's around at the time. Yeah, it's going to be. I remember in the 70s it was the Ice Age, and then there was a book by John Brunner, To Stand on Zanzibar, where the disaster was overpopulation. There was even a Star Trek episode about it, and people were really worried that there'd be too many people in the world, and they had this vision of everybody standing, nobody having any room. And of course now it's the opposite. There's not going to be any people, and people see both of those. They see global warming as the end of the world. They saw them in the Ice Age, but the Ice Age is the end of the world. The new Ice Age. They saw overpopulation as the end of the world. They see no population as the end of the world. And it's as if we have this template, this apocalyptic end of the world story we tell ourselves, and we just fit whatever's around. Go, yeah, this is it. Whether it is or not. I suspect. The truth of it is, whether you like it or not, the world may become very, very hot, but so is Venus. The world will continue. We may all die, and life forms will evolve. There are snails that live in volcanoes, and I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just saying, inevitably it won't be the end of the world. Again, there will be an end of this world one of these days. We believe, astronomers, that the sun will die, but it won't be the end of everything, I don't think. Anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about in that, but there we are. Where was I? The apocalypse. So yeah, that came from hubris, didn't it? The idea that mankind could be too hubristic and overreach its and step into. And I think all this GMO stuff, genetically modified food, there is a real fear that this is what we're doing now. We're just not as clever as we think we are. And you do things to your car or your computer or your central heating, you change one thing, you don't know how to put it right. So it could be that if we introduce these genetically modified organisms into the world, which we already have, we might. And AI is another apocalypse, isn't it? It's another apocalypse story. Anyway, so it's hubris and apocalypse. Is this what's happening to Eustace? He has the temerity to become a scientist. So, and he's an intellectual science. So, the chthonic, I love that word, the deep forces, the irrational forces are symbolized by this unpleasant, nasty, greedy. Is it greedy? It's malevolent, certainly. Hand. And it seems to be self-seeking. God knows what it wants, excuse me. Who knows what it wants? Don't know. But he's punished poor old Eustace. Or it could be simply because he drove a nail into it. But it was very interested in him, and he was very interested in it when it still was attached to his uncle. So I do feel that it was attracted to him because of his scientific curiosity. Yeah, if we wanted to get into sort of psychoanalytical thinking, we talk about these complexes and autonomous complexes, which are sub-personalities, and then we get into all sorts of things like dissociative identity disorder and multiple identity disorder, whereby people can have many sub-personalities, very much like the alien hand. And a lot of these people with brain injuries, they have sub-personalities inside them, and who are autonomous and have their own wants and needs. And certainly in Jungian thought, many of the archetypes, Jung in the Red Book, in the Black Books and the Red Books, it's quite clear that these are real personalities. These things he encounters in his unconscious are real. And of course, most of humanity throughout history would agree that there are angelic or demonic intelligences out there in the ether. So there we are. That is sort of related to automatic writing. Remember, this hand writes things, and it can write. I don't know if you know much about automatic writing. It was a big thing in the sort of 19th century, but what we have is, the first tradition we have is in the 16th century, the Elizabethan mathematician, philosopher and occultist, Dr. John Dee, genius, and his roguish seer and clairvoyant Edward Kelly. Edward Kelly was a bit of a criminal. He had his ears chopped for forgery, but he was also a bit into necromancy as well. And he also ended up, he's talking to these angels, the Enochian, so-called Enochian angels, who dictate an alphabet and a language. I've got a book on it here that they say is the angelic language, and if you master this, you have great magical power. But I haven't mastered it. But Kelly at one point says that the angels say we should have our wives in common. And Dee says, you what? He says, yeah, your wife. Angels say I should sleep with her. Oh, right, okay. Dee sounds a bit gullible in that sense. Anyway, so they have this is the 1500s, and then a bit later we have, in 1910, there's a book called Gates of Memory by Captain J.W. Bligh Bond. And he was an archaeologist working at Glastonbury Abbey, and he, with his seer, Captain Allen, who wasn't his real name, they spoke to these dead monks who told them of the layout of the abbey, and when they dug it up, lo, there it was. And then the bishop found out that this is how he's doing it. He sacked him, fired him, And then we have, of course, W.B. Yeats, famous Irish poet, who he married later in life his wife Georgie Hyde-Lees, who had a talent for automatic writing shortly after they got married in 1917. So very much around about the time that this story was written. And he wrote a book called A Vision, and this, he felt he was being given details of great knowledge from the occult realms about the future of humanity. There's been other ones channeled, like Seth Speaks, and of course the famous Course in Miracles. And these big books have been dictated by these superhuman or extra-human intelligences. And skeptics would say they're just full of platitudes and nonsense. Actually, A Course in Miracles seems to be quite Gnostic. That is to say, it's not a stupid book at all, and a lot of things it says are echoed in Gnostic Christianity and Gnostic paganism, and also the Indian Vedic traditions, the Sanskrit stuff. So you pays your money and you takes your choice whether you believe it or not. But it's interesting that this, and I think this is 1919, so many people were killed in the First World War that there was a big surge in mediums, and it was a flourishing time for people wanting to consult psychics and mediums in order to get in touch with their loved ones on the other side. And again, whether you believe that is a real talent or possibility, that I kind of do, or you believe that some of them were just milking it to make money out of vulnerable people. Yeah, I believe that as well. And because the truth is always somewhere in the murky greyness, and I think I began by saying that, so it's a nice place to end. Anyway, you find when you get into these stories, there's always so much to say about them, and we could have gone on. Now, to wrap up, I don't know if you know, I'm working two things, Sam. I'm doing this on GarageBand, which is a free audio editing program. I've used some quite expensive ones in the past, and I don't know about the sound quality. I think the last one I did, people thought it was okay. Let me know if you think there's a problem. Next thing is I'm working with a YouTube coach, David. He's a great lad, and he's very keen on lives. I think YouTube, where you go live on your phone. And I'm like, yeah, but what do I talk about? I mean, all right, okay. Say I say on at 10 p.m. British summertime, whatever time that is in the world, I go live and I'm there, and what do I talk about? Because you can't just talk about nout, can you? And I don't think I'm going to be reading stories. And he said, well, do a question and answer. And I'm going, yeah, but what do people want to know? They're fascinated. They're really curious about behind the scenes, how you find the stories, why you choose particular stories, how you record them, what are the minefields you have to navigate. And I said, really? And he said, I'll tell you what, ask them what they want to. So I think I need the questions in advance. So put some comments about what you'd like to know about. and that I might be able to answer. Now, if you ask about what's the secret to world peace, probably not going to be able to answer that one. Is there a cure for, tinnitus, for one thing? That would be good. I'd like to know that. If you know it, tell me. You can ask me about what microphone do you use. Oh yeah, I know that one. Or you can ask me about which stories do you particularly like. Anyway, you think about it. Hope that's all right. Little Ruby's come back. Did you catch that fly? No, I didn't think you would. There she is. But she's a lovely girl. She's a lovely, aren't you? Yes. Yes, you are. All right. Bye.